My dear old dad, our family, has plenty of things that scare the hell out of you. Some of them I knew about. Some of them I watched happen and deliberately chose not to stop. And there are still some things even I don't fully understand. Charles Carter was so furious he couldn't speak for a long moment, as if he could barely catch his breath. He pointed at Robert Carter and roared, "You ungrateful bastard. Even if you hate me, you shouldn't." Robert shook his head and looked at his dad with open mockery. "I stopped hating you a long time ago. When Mom died. I hated you for not coming back. When I took my college entrance exam, I hated you for not being there with me. When Grace and I got engaged, you were too busy to come back. I hated you then too, when Grace couldn't give birth to a son. You forced her to have 7 daughters. Even after her body was falling apart, you still wanted her to keep trying. I hated you for that too. When Grace gave birth to Tyler and nearly died from massive blood loss, you only cared about your precious grandson. I still hated you. We finally had a boy, and then you schemed to have Tyler sent to an orphanage. I hated you for that too. Then you used adoption as an excuse to bring your illegitimate son's child into our home. And I still hated you. We knew perfectly well Tyler was nearby, but you deliberately kept us from seeing him. When the boy came looking for us himself, you ordered the bodyguards to drive him away. You were the one who made me cut that child out of my heart. You were the one who made us favor your illegitimate son's child. My dear old dad. Robert shook his head. You think I hate you? Don't make me laugh. I deliberately left all those things here. I deliberately let those people who infiltrated this family plant them inside our home because I wanted to remember. I wanted to remember everything you've done every single day. Do I hate you? Robert stared straight into Charles's eyes. I, Robert Carter, hate every single person in the Carter family equally, including myself. And I also knew someone was taking advantage of what happened with Ethan Carter's fate. Robert's expression gradually twisted into something almost vicious. As he continued, I don't know who's really behind all this or why they're doing it, but I love it. I want to watch everything you treasure, everything you fought so hard to preserve, get completely destroyed. I want you to watch the heir you personally chose turn into a spineless little coward who only knows how to use petty, underhanded tricks. I deliberately raised the Carter daughters to be selfish, to care about no one but themselves. I wanted to watch them fight over the family fortune until they tore each other apart and grow to despise your eldest grandson. I even wanted to beat to death the grandson you sent away, the one you hoped would someday become a powerful outside pillar supporting this family. What a shame. Robert gave another bitter, self-mocking laugh. I didn't manage to kill that kid. After everything I did, I only ended up creating an unexpected variable. Guess even the best plans can't beat fate. Right, Charles Carter? Robert looked strangely calm, with neither joy nor sorrow on his face. Yet somehow, he also looked completely insane. Every movement, every word, sent a chill through everyone watching him. By then, I had already gone home, and I still had no idea what was happening at the Carter estate. That old Taoist had said we'd meet again at the Carter estate, but I had absolutely no intention of going there. I was a man with a legitimate cultivation inheritance, not some self-taught fraud wandering in from nowhere. I wasn't particularly interested in getting involved with a celestial master from Mount Longhu, or forming any kind of connection with him. At least, not for now. I was much more interested in studying dual cultivation and examining the 2 artifacts I'd just obtained, both made from pseudo-spirit stones. I needed to build a proper dual cultivation room as soon as possible, and use it to strengthen Emma's constitution. Then, I could use dual cultivation to guide her onto the path of cultivation. After that, I also needed to investigate Sophia Reed's constitution. And, of course, there was still my electric motorcycle business. I had way too much on my plate. I really had no interest in visiting that old celestial master. After I got home, I chatted with my adoptive parents for a while, then went back to my room and took out the 2 artifacts I'd just acquired. I was just about to study them more carefully when my phone suddenly blasted its ridiculous ringtone. I glanced at the screen, then answered, Yo, Ryan, how come you haven't gone out for barbecue with your buddies these past few days? Ryan Mitchell had a little money now, and practically lived on barbecue 3 meals a day. At night, he often drove around in the A6 and grabbed barbecue with his friends. I didn't care at all. I was planning to replace the car eventually anyway, and the A6 would become Ryan's car sooner or later. If he didn't take care of it and wanted to drive it into the ground, that was his problem. In fact, I even felt like I had a slightly evil thought. Maybe I should wait until Ryan wrecked the car himself, fine him a huge amount of money, and then give him the car afterward. Of course, that would only happen if Ryan got way too cocky and completely trashed the thing for now. Although he drove it everywhere, he was still pretty careful with it. On the other end of the call, Ryan lowered his voice and asked, "You're not on speaker, right? Your mom and dad aren't there, are they?" "No, they're not." "Just say whatever you need to say." I found his behavior a little strange. What the hell was this guy doing? Why was he acting so mysterious? Ryan still sounded uneasy. "Just come out. Tell them you're grabbing barbecue with me." Wowry. Move it. That immediately gave me a bad feeling. I had no idea what had happened. But if Ryan was being this secretive, it definitely wasn't anything good. Had one of his buddies gotten into trouble, or had something else happened? I had no clue, so I changed into some clothes, told my adoptive parents that I was going out for barbecue with Ryan, and headed downstairs. The moment I left the neighborhood, I spotted my car parked near the intersection. "What happened?" I asked the moment I got in. Ryan opened his mouth, as if he wanted to explain. But after struggling for a while, he held back and said, "Let's go to the Long High Road police station in the high-tech district first." "What?" I froze. "Wait, Ryan, did one of your buddies get arrested? Are you trying to bail someone out? Couldn't you handle that yourself? Why drag me into it? We are bailing someone out." Ryan clearly didn't know how to explain it. But forget it. You'll understand when we get there. Seriously? Why are you being so mysterious? Since Ryan refused to explain, I stopped asking. On the way there, I formed a simple, invisible, heaven-facing posture and began cultivating. Once we entered the police station, an officer quickly came over and led us straight to the station chief's office. The chief of Long High Road Police Station was in his 40s, a slightly overweight man who looked permanently stressed. His name was Frank Lewis. When Ryan and I entered, Chief Lewis put out his cigarette. He first studied Ryan, then shifted his gaze to me, and looked me up and down for a long moment, before finally sighing miserably. "Great! The main guy is finally here. Take a look at this first. Then we'll talk after you've thought it over." With that, he pushed a case file across the desk. I opened it. It was an interview record. Harmony Hospital disturbance case. The Harmony Hospital? Just from the name, it sounded like a private hospital. And a hospital disturbance? Thinking about the call I'd suddenly received from my sixth sister earlier today. Could this have happened there? But even if it had, so what? Just arrest whoever caused trouble, and be done with it. I had no interest in getting involved with Carter family business. Besides, I wasn't planning to enter the medical industry in the future. So why had they called me here? "Look at the person involved," Ryan reminded me. I flipped farther back. "Lucas Reed? What's wrong with this guy?" I still didn't understand, but when I looked at the photo, my expression instantly changed. I'd actually had the unfortunate pleasure of meeting him once before. Chief Lewis lit another cigarette and said helplessly, "He's also been running around saying the youngest Carter heir from Shanghai is definitely going to become his brother-in-law someday. He's arrogant as hell. This whole thing is a nightmare to deal with." My mouth twitched. "Where is he?" "In Officer Zhang's dorm room." Chief Lewis frowned even deeper. "We originally wanted to mediate the situation and send him away. But there's absolutely no reasoning with this guy." I was even more speechless. It felt like Victoria Carter had set me up. Though I couldn't really blame her either, and I couldn't exactly blame myself. Where did this guy even come from? "From Kindy," Chief Lewis said, taking another drag from his cigarette. He claimed he'd come down from Mount Zhongnan, and said offending him wasn't the real problem. But if we'd delayed the best chance to save someone's life, none of us would get away with it. Who was he trying to save? I was starting to lose it. Wasn't this straight out of one of those old-school Master Descends the Mountain novels? He forced his way into a hospital room to save someone, right? Using acupuncture and traditional medicine, right? And probably some other ridiculous technique, like some miracle needle method that could snatch someone back from death, right? And judging from the way he talked, he'd apparently taken a liking to one of the Carter girls. Victoria Carter? Arthur Bennett, Chief Lewis said. He was out shopping with his granddaughter this morning when he suddenly had a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital. Lucas happened to be nearby. His granddaughter? I knew a little about Arthur Bennett. He was the president of Shanghai Academy of Fine Arts, the chairman of the Guangnan Provincial Art Association, and also vice chairman of the Shanghai Writers Association. He enjoyed collecting and authenticating antiques and occasionally dabbled in stone gambling. He wasn't particularly close to my adoptive dad, but they weren't strangers either. They were at least familiar enough to talk when they met. His granddaughter was named Chloe Bennett, if I remembered correctly, when the original owner of this body was around 7 or 8. He'd gone with Dad to attend a small gathering hosted by the Art Association and met her there. The impression she'd left was that she was a little spoiled and headstrong. She was also a student at number 8 high school and had taken this year's college entrance exam as a vocal music student, applying to the music department at Shanghai Academy of Fine Arts. I had no idea how good her grades were, but apparently she wasn't exactly interested in studying. Her hobbies were basically street dancing, rap, and basketball. She sounded pretty rebellious. Whenever my adoptive parents mentioned her comments were usually neutral, though leaning slightly critical. Come to think of it, she really did fit the profile of a heroine from an old-school wish fulfillment novel. Pretty, probably with a great figure, and a grandfather with strong local connections. Most importantly, some sudden crisis had occurred, giving the protagonist the perfect chance to show off. She might have even looked down on him at first. This was, seriously, I tossed the file back onto the desk and groaned, "What kind of ridiculous mess is this? Can't anything ever be normal?" Even though Harmony Hospital was privately owned, and even if Victoria hadn't called me earlier, judging from the photo and the police report, Lucas really was a cultivator. He had probably already stepped onto the path. He possessed spiritual energy and had learned some martial arts, which meant the hospital security guards never stood a chance against him. He'd already injured several of them. Then, after forcing his way inside, he damaged an entire set of intensive care equipment and completely disrupted the ICU. Victoria had gone to the hospital today to see our third sister, according to her own statement, run short on money, and gone there to borrow some from her. Our third sister was named Olivia Carter. The original Chinese name had sounded a little unusual, but that wasn't important. What mattered was that after Lucas barged in and dragged the patient out, the situation immediately spiraled. Olivia went in after him, and if security rushed him again, he'd probably start throwing punches all over again. But what gave me the biggest headache was that, judging from his photo, Lucas looked almost exactly like my adoptive dad. There was basically no need to question it. He was absolutely my adoptive parents' biological son. The problem now is, Chief Lewis took another drag from his cigarette and continued. Olivia Carter, the director of Harmony Hospital, refuses to settle. The security guards he injured have all undergone official injury evaluations, and none of them want to settle either. Arthur Bennett's eldest granddaughter doesn't want to settle either. No one wants to settle. For the first time, I was completely speechless and genuinely frustrated. I couldn't really say Victoria had screwed me over. Maybe this was one of those rare moments when her stupidity accidentally became useful. Or maybe she genuinely had no other options and really did call me for help. But seriously, my adoptive parents were both smart people. I forcibly swallowed the insult that was about to come out of my mouth. So how the hell did they produce an idiot like this? And judging from what he'd been saying, he had definitely fallen for one of the Carter women. I just didn't know whether he had a thing for an older woman and wanted Olivia, or whether he'd fallen for Victoria. Or maybe, like those protagonists from ancient web novels, every time he saw a beautiful woman, he immediately wanted to add her to his harem. Anything else? I rubbed my temples. This was genuinely difficult. It probably wasn't impossible to get him out. I just prayed this idiot wouldn't have any more surprises waiting for me. There is one more thing. Chief Lewis's voice carried the faintest hint of mockery. He claims one of his senior marshal sisters is the chief of the Changshan District Public Security Bureau, and another senior sister is some big shot in Linjiang District. He said he'd make me regret ever crossing him, and have me packing my things and losing my job. He even told me I'd better watch my back when I walk home at night. I glanced at Ryan beside me. I had no words left. Had living in the mountains completely fried this guy's brain? Forget the fact that the chief of the Changshan District Bureau had no authority over a police station in the high-tech district. As for that so-called Linjiang District big shot, one organized crime investigation by the local police, and they'd probably be finished with him acting this arrogant. Was he trying to get his senior sister arrested as quickly as possible? Or did he think his dad's retirement had been way too peaceful? This guy hadn't come down the mountain to find his family. He'd come down to make life harder for everyone he knew. And now that pressure had landed directly on me. Seriously, it had landed right on my head. Looking through the interview record, I felt an even worse headache coming on. Suddenly, I remembered a novel I'd read in my previous life. The plot had been almost identical to what was happening today. The protagonist had transmigrated into someone rich and powerful, with money, influence, and countless people working for him, while his opponent was one of those Master Descends the Mountain protagonists. After transmigrating, when the protagonist encountered the exact same kind of situation, he simply called the police, ordered official injury evaluations, and had the hospital's damaged equipment professionally appraised. Naturally, the guy who'd just come down from the mountain couldn't afford the compensation, and ended up behind bars. The heroine also became attached to the transmigrated protagonist because of the way he handled everything. Now that I was facing the same kind of plot, it felt strangely uncomfortable because, in that novel, although the mountain guy had beaten people up, he'd been careful not to seriously injure anyone, and I didn't think he'd destroyed any expensive equipment either. So the protagonist still had ways to fight back. He challenged the injury reports and the equipment damage assessment, while the other side applied for fresh injury and loss evaluations. And since the heroine already liked the mountain protagonist, she knew the opposing side had falsified evidence. So countering them was relatively simple, and mediation was eventually easy to arrange. But the problem I faced was that this so-called brother of mine, who shared neither of my biological parents, was painfully straightforward. He had genuinely beaten several security guards badly enough to send them to orthopedics. He had genuinely destroyed hospital equipment. And he had genuinely followed a woman and forced his way into her hospital room, without her having even the slightest affection for him. Damn it, Ryan might have been a little thick-headed and sometimes difficult to carry, but Lucas was straight-up nightmare difficulty. Originally, because of my relationship with my adoptive parents, and because my divination showed that their biological son also had protagonist-level fate, I figured he'd simply get tangled up with the Carter family again. That alone had already seemed ridiculous, but at least he was supposed to be capable, and potentially become one of my strongest allies in the future. Now that I'd actually seen what he was like, I suppressed the urge to turn around and leave. Let me meet him. I need to see this guy myself. Chief Lewis quickly took me to a small private dorm room. The moment he opened the door, I saw the guy who, theoretically, could call me his brother, lounging carelessly on the couch and looking around with obvious boredom. When he saw me enter, his eyes settled on me first. He studied me for a moment, then looked away, as if I wasn't even worth talking to. I studied him too, judging purely by his appearance. He was almost a younger copy of my adoptive dad. But when it came to temperament, he hadn't inherited a single one of my adoptive parents' good qualities. I couldn't help shaking my head. Lucas Reed, I sat across from him. Aren't you curious who I am or why I came here because of this mess? You're a lawyer. Lucas suddenly seemed interested. Did the Bennett family send you? Or did the Carter family? I almost didn't know what to say. Why would you think that? That's how it works in novels. Lucas gave me a confident smile. I've read tons of them, so I know how things work down here. Someone like me is obviously supposed to be some kind of protagonist, probably one of those Master Descends the Mountain protagonists. The world I lived in now was almost identical to my previous world in most ways, so the kinds of novels that existed in my previous life existed here too, and this world had pretty much all of them too, including things like Duluo and similar novels, though some of the titles were probably a little different. So Master Descends the Mountain. Stories existed here too. Have you ever considered that you might actually be cannon fodder in an anti-cliché novel? I asked him in return. A mountain descending protagonist was naturally the main character in his own kind of novel. But in an anti-cliché story, that same protagonist would become a supporting character, and possibly one who died a spectacularly miserable death. What are you talking about? Lucas smiled confidently. My master already told me. My dad holds a major government position in Shanghai, and he's extremely influential. My mom has connections everywhere too, and their adopted son is the future heir of the Carter family. My master also told me he arranged a marriage contract with the Carter family for me. 2 of my senior sisters are right here in Shanghai. My eldest senior sister is Rachel Reed, chief of the Changshan District Public Security Bureau. My second senior sister is the underground queen of Linjiang District. She practically runs the whole district. Her word carries more weight there than the police, and she's famous throughout Shanghai. As for my medical talent, Master says I'm a once-in-a-generation genius. I've got power, influence, connections. So why wouldn't I be the protagonist? Why would I ever be some supporting character? What a lunatic, I cursed inwardly. Still, this was a little unexpected. So he wasn't just a standard mountain-descending miracle doctor. He even had the classic arranged marriage setup. Jealous? Lucas curled his lips into a smug, king-of-the-world grin. If you can settle this mess for me, I promise that if you ever get cancer or something in the future, I'll treat you once. By now, I had a pretty good idea what was wrong with him. He'd probably come down from the mountain without seriously learning how the real world worked. Then after reading too many novels, he'd started believing. That reality actually followed web novel logic. First of all, I sat up straighter and gave him a faint smile. Let me introduce myself. I'm not a lawyer. My name is Tyler. Technically, that name should have been yours. My original name was supposed to be Ethan Carter. So, I'm the person you keep talking about, the future heir of the Carter family, your parents' adopted son, and the future brother-in-law you've been bragging about all day. Second, I'm going to explain something to you about how this world actually works. It does not run according to the logic of the novels you've been reading. You're not some protagonist, and what you did today already broke multiple laws. What? Lucas stared at me in disbelief. Don't look so shocked. I tapped the case file in my hand. Let me explain exactly how many laws you've broken. Your actions today violated the Public Security Administration Punishments Law, the Criminal Law, and the Physician's Law, following Chloe Bennett around. Violated public security regulations, and may constitute harassment or invasion of privacy. You could face a warning, a fine, or administrative detention, forcing your way into the ICU and practicing medicine without a license. Respectively, violate public security regulations and medical practice laws. They could constitute disturbing public order and illegal medical practice, which could mean administrative detention or up to 3 years in prison. Beating the hospital security guards may constitute intentional assault. At minimum, you could face administrative detention, and at worst, up to 3 years in prison. Destroying ICU equipment may constitute intentional destruction of property. Depending on the value of the equipment, you could face up to 3 years in prison or a fine. If the circumstances are especially serious, the sentence could range from 3 to 7 years. And you managed to do all of that in a single day. Under Article 69 of the criminal law, multiple convictions can be combined into a single sentence. At this point, you're looking at least at 5 to 10 years in prison. I seriously wanted to curse him out, more than he could possibly imagine. My voice turned icy. If you weren't Mom and Dad's biological son, I'd send you straight to prison today. Then I'd have both of your senior sisters investigated too. One of them would probably see her career come to an end because of you. And the other had better hope her hands are clean, or she'll be joining you behind bars soon enough. Do you know what you should be doing right now? I slapped the case file lightly. Keep your head down and lose the attitude. When everyone comes to negotiate, apologize properly. Get written letters of forgiveness. Let me pay whatever compensation is needed. Then I'll ask Mom, Dad, and Uncle Michael to use their connections to help get you out of here. Instead of sitting here acting like some untouchable big shot, Lucas clearly had never imagined that things could be completely different from what he'd expected. Today, the smartest thing you can do is nothing. Stay right here from now on. Don't go anywhere. I clenched my teeth. forcing down every bit of anger in me, and tried to keep my voice as calm as possible. I'll talk to Chloe and her grandfather first. Then I'll go speak with Olivia. Once I've negotiated with them, I'll contact Mom, Dad, and Uncle Michael and see what can be done. If you keep acting according to those novels, it won't be long before your mountain descending story turns into a prison story. That's not what Mom and Dad want. And frankly, I don't want to see it either. Gah. Lucas completely failed to understand that I was trying to help him. His eyes gradually turned cold, as if he'd already seen through everything, just like in the novels. What? I was completely dumbfounded. What exactly is just like the novels? True heir, fake heir stories. Lucas said, I've read plenty of them. The fake heir is always terrified that the real heir will come back and steal his power and status. Enough. This idiot actually made me laugh from sheer frustration. You've seriously fried your brain reading too many novels. What kind of insane role-playing is this? So apparently, not only did I have to be the punching bag in a true heir, fake heir story with the Carter family, I also had to come over to the Reed family and play the scheming fake heir too? Did novels rot your brain? I snapped. You already know I know about the Carter family. So how do you not know your parents don't have any daughters? Not a single one. After you disappeared, I was the only child they raised. That doesn't even meet the basic setup for a true heir, fake heir story. Wait, maybe they really don't. Lucas fell into deep thought. Then he looked at me with obvious disappointment, still seeming reluctant to believe it. My parents seriously never had another child. I don't even have one older sister. No eldest sister, second sister, or third sister. Talking to this guy was genuinely raising my tolerance for stupidity to new heights. You're the oldest child. I forced myself to stay patient. Even if your parents had another kid, it would be a younger sister. In true heir, fake heir stories, the two heirs are usually the youngest sons. So even if you did have another sibling, you'd be in a switched daughter story, not a true heir, fake heir story. Right now, stop thinking and stop doing anything. Eat when you're hungry, drink when you're thirsty, and don't start ordering the people here around. I stood up. I seriously suggest you read more nonfiction and maybe some political or bureaucratic dramas. Stop using web novels as your guide to reality. If you don't want books, I can recommend some TV shows. You can watch those instead and maybe learn a little about how the real world actually operates. They won't be perfectly realistic either, but they'll still be a lot better than the garbage you've been reading. With that, I headed for the door. But before leaving, I still couldn't completely relax. We may not share any blood, but because of Mom and Dad, I'm willing to accept you as my brother. And as your brother, here's my advice. Stay here until this situation is resolved. Don't go anywhere until we come get you. Once I left the police station, my head was pounding. This so-called mountain descending protagonist wasn't someone I would have paid much attention to under normal circumstances. If not for his identity, I wouldn't have bothered with him at all. Ryan leaned back in the driver's seat, then turned to look at me. So, what are you going to do? What can I do? I shot back. Deal with it somehow. Seeing how completely exhausted I looked. Ryan seemed unusually serious too, as if he'd thought everything through before speaking. Anyway, as far as I'm concerned, even if you stop using the Reed name someday, you're still the only brother I'll recognize. My dad feels the same way. Before I could figure out what he was getting at, Ryan continued, didn't that idiot mention true heir, fake heir novels? I've been reading some of those First Life, Second Life stories lately too, and I feel like my character role might be one of those idiots who blindly protects the fake heir, believes everything the fake heir says, and helps him bully the real heir. Don't bother trying to talk me out of it. Once I decide someone's family, I don't change my mind. I'm not great at school, and I'm nowhere near as sharp as some people. When, Tyler, you had me listen to that old man at the Carter estate tell his story, because you wanted me to become someone like him, right? I don't know if I can ever reach his level. Ryan thumped his chest. But as long as you still call me your brother, and you're still willing to let me call you mine, I'll follow you through hell itself. Bombs, bullets, cultivators. I'll stand in front of you and take them all. As long as I'm alive, nothing's happening to you. And if you die, I'll be waiting for you at the gates of hell. What the hell are you talking about? I told you to read more, not fill your head with this garbage. I kicked the back of his seat. We're law-abiding citizens. We're absolutely not going around bullying people. Let's head back first. This whole situation is definitely something Mom and Dad need to know about. I almost laughed at the whole protagonist versus supporting character idea, even though Lucas really was a mess. Because of my adoptive parents, I could still extend some goodwill to him and treat him a little better. Whether he wanted to marry one of the Carter girls someday or build himself a whole harem, I honestly didn't care. He could live out his mountain-descending protagonist fantasy, while I made money, bought spirit stones, cultivated, and eventually pursued immortality, as long as neither of us interfered with the other. But if he really insisted on getting himself killed, God, because he'd read too many novels, and kept trying to drag me into some real fake air feud, I gave a cold laugh. Then I wouldn't mind teaching him all over again how the real world actually worked. Not every fake air only knew how to cry and play the victim. And this wasn't the kind of world where you could slap someone around, beat them into the hospital in public, and simply walk away untouched. Mom and Dad might be able to save him once or twice, but there would never be a third time. When that day came, the people sending him to prison might very well be Mom and Dad themselves. In the true fake air novels I'd read in my previous life, the reborn real heir often fought back by slapping people in return, and later outright beating the fake heir, or certain family members badly enough to hospitalize them. Then, because the real heir held leverage over them, the fake heir, or whoever got beaten, would tell the police it was just a family matter, and the officers would give a meaningless warning before leaving. But reality didn't work like that. Under the law, if the victim suffered more than a minor injury, refusing to pursue the matter or offering forgiveness could at most reduce the punishment. The police could still open a criminal investigation and transfer the case to prosecutors. Uncle Michael? Ryan froze. But Lucas is his biological son. Who knows? I closed my eyes. Let's just go back first. Someone capable of reaching the provincial leadership knows how to weigh interests better than anyone. But in this world, there are also plenty of people who stay shrewd their entire lives, only to make one terrible mistake when they get old, because they become too protective of their children. So there really was no easy answer. If my adoptive parents chose to protect their biological son no matter what, then I'd simply leave without hesitation. I just hope things wouldn't come to that. I really didn't want to become someone who cut off every family tie he had. The car slowly pulled away and drove through the dark streets of Jianghai. When we reached my neighborhood and I got out, "Aren't you leaving?" I looked at Ryan, who showed absolutely no intention of driving away. "I booked you a hotel," Ryan said, holding up his phone. "I may not be as smart as you, but I'm pretty good at reading people." The first time I saw that guy, I immediately felt he wasn't the type to sit quietly and behave. "You go upstairs first. I'll wait here. If everything's fine, send me a message. If something happens, come straight back down." "Ryan, you really don't have to." I felt a little helpless. Sometimes Ryan could be dense and completely oblivious, but other times his instincts about people and situations were frighteningly sharp. "Nothing's probably going to happen." I said, "You should go." "It's fine," Ryan replied. "You go upstairs first. I don't mind leaving a little later." I knew how stubborn he was, so I stopped arguing. When I walked back into the neighborhood, I saw the lights in my apartment were still on. But what surprised me most was that the light in my own room was on too. I frowned. From the original owner's memories, my adoptive parents had always respected his privacy. Unless there was some special reason, they basically would never enter his room when he wasn't home. And, given the original owner's personality, he didn't have many friends, so there was almost no chance. One of them had shown up in the middle of the night, and was waiting in his room, which meant there was only one possibility. I sighed and shook my head. Ignorance really was fearless. The weather was getting colder, and apparently someone was about to need an extra layer. I turned around and left the neighborhood again. Ryan was still waiting there, leaning against the car with a cigarette between his lips. The moment he saw me, his expression practically screamed, "See, I told you so." "Let's go." Ryan opened the passenger door for me. "We'll head to the hotel. I'll go get my future sister-in-law for you. along with your documents and everything else you need. My adoptive parents really had terrible luck ending up with a son like Lucas. I didn't answer. This could have been handled privately. Unfortunately, someone had chosen the hardest possible way to deal with it. Don't go to the hotel yet. I thought for a moment. Do you know the chief of the Linjiang District Public Security Bureau? Do you have his personal number? Can you get him to come out? And do you know where he lives? Ryan looked confused. Well, I'm not that familiar with him. I think he lives somewhere around South Yong'an Road, but my dad definitely has his number. And if we ask him out, he should probably come, then call him. I pulled out my phone and searched for barbecue restaurants on South Yong'an Road in Linjiang District. After filtering through the options, I found a place called Veterans Barbecue and placed an order. Then I sent the address to Ryan. Tell him we're having barbecue here. Ryan looked at the address in confusion. If you just want barbecue, I can eat with you. Why invite the Linjiang Bureau chief? We barely know the guy. How are we supposed to relax and eat? I gave him a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Doesn't matter. It won't take long. When he gets here, just eat your food. Ryan stopped asking questions and called his dad. He exchanged a few words before hanging up. Apparently the guy's last name is Carter too. His name is Daniel Carter. He lives in Starlight Garden on South Yong'an Road. My dad said he'll send me his number in a second and told you to contact him yourself. A moment later, Ryan's phone vibrated. He glanced down and saw a message from his dad. Without thinking much about it, he forwarded the number to me. I looked at the phone number, then checked the barbecue place I'd chosen. It's on the same road. Not far at all. From Starlight Garden to Veterans Barbecue. It was only a little over 100 meters on foot. Perfect. No need to change anything. We'll just go there. Ryan drove, while I stared out the window, with a complicated expression, quietly calculating something in my head. After a while, we arrived at Veterans Barbecue on Yong'an Road in Linjiang District, because I'd ordered ahead, and specifically requested a private room. But the place was packed. None were immediately available. We waited for a short while, until a small private room opened up. Then Ryan and I went inside. The moment we sat down, I immediately dialed the number. After waiting a few seconds, a strong, middle-aged male voice answered from the other end. Hello? Hello, Chief Carter. Sorry to bother you. I immediately spoke first. Chief Carter, were you already resting? I feel terrible calling you this late. Who is this? The voice on the other end sounded puzzled. Oh, look at me. I slapped my forehead. I was so happy you answered that I completely forgot to introduce myself. My name is Tyler. I don't know whether Uncle Michael has ever mentioned me to you. Oh, Tyler. Chief Carter finally seemed to remember. Why are you calling me this late? Did something happen? Come on, Chief Carter. I laughed warmly. Nothing happened. You know Uncle Michael's son, Ryan, my brother, is running a business with me. We both ended up staying out late tonight. Ryan suggested we grab some barbecue. And while we were talking, your name happened to come up. So I figured, since you're also an old acquaintance of Uncle Michael, Ryan also said he hadn't seen you in a long time. And since I'm doing business around here, I might need your help someday. So tonight just happened to be perfect. Hawaiian and I are at Veterans Barbecue right near your place, having some food we just ordered when I joked about inviting you over. I really was only kidding. I didn't expect you to actually answer the phone. Now that I've already called, I'd feel terrible wasting the chance. Would you mind joining us younger guys for a meal? Who knows? Ryan and I might have to trouble you in the future. So I'm shamelessly asking you to come over to Veterans Barbecue. Chief Carter sounded a little surprised. Oh, I can come by, but I have work tomorrow, so I can't drink. No problem, no alcohol. I immediately said, you don't have to drink. I'll already be thrilled if you come. We'll be waiting for you. At Veterans Barbecue, I finally met the chief of the Linjiang District Public Security Bureau. Daniel Carter was a man in his 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with an extremely solid build. At a glance, he looked like someone who exercised constantly. After exchanging a few polite greetings, I invited Chief Carter into the private room. We sat down. The table was already covered with cold appetizers, grilled meat, vegetables, chicken wings, and all kinds of other dishes. It was actually quite a spread. Chief Carter looked serious. When he'd said he was only stopping by, he apparently meant it Literally, he didn't even touch his chopsticks. Right, I smiled. There's still a fish on the grill. It should be ready soon. You've got to try some when it comes out. I don't eat fish. Chief Carter forced a slight smile. I'm really just here to see what you wanted. You're seriously not going to eat anything? I picked up the beer, intending to pour him a glass first. But Chief Carter clearly wasn't interested in humoring me. He flipped his cup upside down and gave me a stiff smile. Tyler, that's not very nice. We already agreed over the phone. I have work tomorrow. So I'm not drinking tonight. Waha. I laughed awkwardly. Right, I completely forgot. My mistake. I'll punish myself with 3 drinks. 3 drinks. With that, I poured myself 3 glasses in a row and drank all of them. Then you have to at least try some fish, Chief Carter. I set down my glass. I heard the fish in Linjiang District is supposed to be incredible. That's why we came here tonight. I'm allergic to that kind of food. Chief Carter folded his hands over his stomach and quietly shifted his chair farther and farther back until he was well away from the table, making it obvious he wasn't planning to take a single bite and would leave at any moment. Allergic, huh? I stopped pushing the food. Actually, the real reason I invited you out tonight was to ask you something. Do you know whether Linjiang District has some kind of so-called underground? Queen? Never heard of one. Chief Carter replied coldly. Tyler, if you're doing business here and you're worried about certain people, I can promise you this. As long as you obey the law and conduct yourself properly, no one in this district will dare cause trouble for you. My face immediately brightened. Then, thank you, Chief Carter. I really appreciate it. To show my gratitude, I picked up the bottle. I'll finish this whole thing. The whole bottle? Yep, all of it. I deliberately acted like some clueless young guy, trying to look cool by chugging straight from the bottle. All right, Chief Carter stood up. If there's nothing else, I'll head out. The bureau's been busy lately. We can get together another time. Of course. I immediately put on an enthusiastic smile and personally walked him out, all the way to the entrance. Only then did I return to the private room. Ryan seemed to have understood what I was doing and asked, "Are you trying to get Chief Carter to deal with that so-called underground queen for you? Do you really need to go this far?" Watching everything that had just happened, he suddenly felt it looked almost exactly like the day I'd met Deputy Chief Wilson and couldn't help saying, that guy just now didn't seem nearly as sharp as Deputy Chief Wilson. Not as sharp? I held a glass of beer. You sure you don't want to think about that again? With your talent for reading people. Are you really sure he didn't understand? Ryan suddenly seemed less certain. Of course, he understood what I meant. I took a sip of beer. It's just that Chief Carter is extremely confident. What do you mean? It's simple. I looked at the plate of fish the server had just brought in, picked up a large piece and took a bite, then washed it down with some beer. Chief Carter works inside the system, so I doubt he's poorly informed. Something as big as what happened with Deputy Chief Wilson, there's no way he hasn't heard about it. When I invited Uncle Wilson to eat seasonal vegetables, not only could he eat them himself, he could even take some back for everyone at the bureau. But when I offered Chief Carter fish, he suddenly became allergic. What's that supposed to mean? Ryan asked. Fish are slippery. If you want to catch one, sometimes you have to drain the whole pond. I gave a cold laugh. And once the water's gone, you might discover an even bigger fish hiding underneath. How could a fish be allergic to fish? It simply doesn't want to eat the kind of fish that might prey on it. Still, this is going to be a little troublesome. After all, we're dealing with one of those mountain-descending miracle doctor setups. Yeah, there are probably a few tricks ordinary people can't easily uncover. But that's all it is, a little trouble. In this world, there will never be a shortage of people who want to eat fish. I smiled at Ryan. Since we came out for barbecue, let's just eat and drink properly. We've got plenty of time. I was getting too impatient, trying to solve everything at once. Ryan cautiously asked, "What about you family?" "No matter what happens, we stay put," I replied. "Tonight, we only came out for barbecue. We've never met anyone named Lucas Reed. And in the next day or two, our electric bikes are officially going on sale. So tonight, we're simply eating and discussing the company's future." "Dad, Mom, I swear I'm not being ungrateful or trying to scheme against your biological son. I really don't have another choice. I hadn't read many mountain-descending protagonist novels in my previous life. but I still understood the basic formulas behind them. An underground criminal queen who could casually make people disappear. Lucas at least had a little common sense. He knew I could easily verify the identity of the Changshan District Police Chief without much effort. So he'd openly given me her name, but this underground queen was another matter. What a shame. The real world wasn't a web novel, and it definitely wasn't some gangster movie. I could take things one step at a time. There was no need to rush. Meanwhile, back at the Reed family home, Lucas sat on the bed that had originally belonged to him, staring blankly at everything around him. This was home. The home that was supposed to have been his. His parents had told him that because of him, they had never moved away all these years. They had stayed here, waiting and hoping for him to come back. And now he had. He hadn't been taken away when he was still an infant. He'd already been old enough when he disappeared to retain a few blurry memories. This was still his room, yet everything looked completely different from what he remembered. And it wasn't just the room. The entire house felt strange to him for reasons he couldn't explain. He was finally home, yet somehow he felt distant from everything. This was clearly his home, and yet he felt more comfortable back on the mountain. He had only just knocked on the door and reunited with the parents he'd dreamed about for years. He could clearly feel that instinctive connection, the bond of shared blood. So why did it still feel like something was missing? Knock, knock, knock. A knock suddenly sounded at the door. Lucas opened it and saw a woman whose black hair was now streaked with gray. Her face no longer looked like the one he'd seen in his dreams. His mother, Linda Reed, stood there with tears in her eyes. Her expression filled with love and overwhelming joy. Her lips moved, as if she wanted to say something, yet couldn't find the words. "Mom, you should call me Lucas for now." Lucas could tell what she was thinking. Even calling her mom still felt awkward and unfamiliar. And the name Tyler, the name that had once belonged to him as a child, now belonged to someone else. Even though he'd finally come home, that name belonged to Tyler now. And that would never change. Lucas, Linda Reed sighed painfully inside. In the end, she couldn't bring herself to call him Tyler. He was overjoyed, yet conflicted beyond words, and her heart ached for him even more. Her son had come home, yet somehow he didn't feel like her son. Inside his own home, he seemed almost like a stranger. "Tyler isn't coming home tonight," Linda said. "Get some rest early." He said he needed to discuss some things with Ryan about their business. Oh, Lucas suddenly understood. Tyler was missing from the house. The fake heir from those true heir, fake heir novels wasn't here. He'd originally assumed that once he came home, a mountain of trouble would be waiting for him, pretending to accidentally hurt himself, deliberately falling down the stairs, jumping into a swimming pool, faking a fainting spell, or suddenly developing some strange illness. He'd read several true heir, fake heir novels, so he already knew all the classic tricks fake heirs used. But the fake heir wasn't even coming home tonight. This was completely different from the novels. He was supposed to return home and find no one welcoming him, while everyone comforted the fake heir instead, telling him that the fake heir was their real family. He didn't have any older sisters either. Well, that wasn't entirely true. He had senior Marshall sisters, Chess, but none of them would ever side with the fake heir. His biological parents didn't seem biased against him either. It felt like he'd mastered every possible counterattack, only to discover there was nothing to use them against. He'd prepared himself completely for the fake heir's relentless attacks, only for the fake heir to run away. This wasn't right. Lucas suddenly felt like he'd figured it out. Playing hard to get. Yes, that had to be it. In some true heir, fake heir novels, when the real heir first returned, he would briefly experience the warmth of family, only to suddenly be cast aside afterward. Exactly. That had to be what was happening. Even though he didn't have any sisters, he knew medicine, could brew medicinal soups, refine pills, and perform acupuncture, and he was even skilled at cooking. Wasn't that exactly the standard setup for a real heir in those novels? Yes, that had to be it. There was one more thing he could use to test her. "Mom," Lucas sounded slightly embarrassed. "I heard parents usually give their kids allowance money and stuff. And what about my allowance?" Linda frowned slightly. He was already grown but didn't have a job yet, and judging from things, he would probably be attending college too. So of course, he needed both living expenses and spending money. But there was a difference between her offering it herself and him directly asking for it, especially on his very first day home. There was also another important issue. Their family had always been fairly strict about money. From elementary school through middle school, they'd tried to prevent Tyler from spending recklessly and followed the principle that boys shouldn't be spoiled with money. Besides, his school had been close to home, so Tyler came home to eat after class. During elementary and middle school, they hadn't given him any allowance. If he wanted something, he simply told them, and they bought it for him. Once he entered high school, his school was farther away, though he still didn't live on campus, so they gave him 500 yuan a month for living expenses, mostly for breakfast and lunch, along with notebooks, pens, and other school supplies. Of course, since he'd been older by then and needed money for socializing, they also added another 300 yuan as personal spending money. Here, now, Tyler was starting his own business, so technically he didn't need money from them anymore. But as his parents, they still gave him some, because he was about to start college. So naturally they planned to give him more. It wasn't just living expenses and allowance. It was also their way of supporting their son. But right now, Linda didn't even know what university Lucas planned to attend, or how much money he'd previously had. She didn't know how much she and her husband should give him, without making it seem unfair. Now that Lucas suddenly asked, she genuinely didn't know what amount would be appropriate. After thinking for a moment, "How about Mom transfers you 300 for now?" Linda said, "Your dad and I will talk it over properly, and then we'll tell you what we've decided." "Okay, thank you." The next morning, I was in the office at my factory when I ended a phone call. "You look pretty happy." Inside the office, Emma was idly scrolling through her new phone. There was no way she could stay in the hospital forever. Once she'd recovered enough, she'd been discharged. For now, I'd rented her a small apartment. "Of course I'm happy," I said with a grin. Uncle Wilson said, "The district bureau and the court can both provide me with a batch of pretty good jade and gemstones. The police side is a little more troublesome. They can only provide rough stones used for stone gambling. So whether I can get high-quality jade out of them will depend on my luck." Emma's face reddened slightly. He knew exactly what I planned to use all that jade for, and what the gemstones were meant to become. "I'll go to the court this afternoon." I thought for a moment. "Then tonight we'll go to the apartment. I just happened to obtain 2 pseudo-spirit stones. We can use them to build a basic spirit-gathering formation and start nurturing the spiritual energy there. The jade bed I originally imagined is obviously impossible for now, so we'll start dual cultivation tonight." At first, I wanted to prepare everything perfectly before we began. But now, it looks like we can't wait. The moment she heard that, Emma's face turned even redder. She held her phone in both hands and raised it in front of her face. "Isn't this a little?" Even though she'd been reborn once, and had spent many years existing as a spirit, when it came down to it, she was still an inexperienced young woman. I almost said something comforting to reassure her. But after thinking about it, I decided against it. My expression became more serious. "If you want me to say something sweet, I can do that. But I don't think I need to feed you comforting lies. At first, I did want everything to be perfect. And of course I wanted to take your feelings into consideration. But right now, we don't have that luxury." My expression turned completely serious. "I've already told you. The people who captured you weren't ordinary human traffickers, and I even took artifacts made from pseudo-spirit stones from them. Those are among the most valuable things that exist in this era. I have friends helping cover things up for me, but that won't last forever. The people who wanted you won't simply give up. Right now, circumstances are forcing them to play along. That's all. They'll definitely find another way to come after us. And right now, we happen to be in a relatively safe window where we can raise our cultivation without holding back. There was no need to even think about it. This was probably one of the rare safe periods we'd get. We had to seize every possible opportunity to become stronger. We absolutely couldn't waste this window. Otherwise, when the next incident hit, I might not be strong enough to stop it. And for you, getting stronger is just as important." I stood up and walked to the window, then opened it. Outside, workers were busy, loading assembled electric motorcycles onto trucks. "I can protect you, but we don't have enough people right now." and I can't stay beside you every second of every day. If you have absolutely no ability to defend yourself, then you're nothing but a huge piece of meat waiting to be taken. If you don't want to be that piece of meat, and you don't want someone kidnapping you to use as a cultivation furnace, then you need to become stronger. We got lucky this time. There's no guarantee we'll be that lucky next time. After listening to me, Emma sat up from the couch and complained with obvious dissatisfaction. You're seriously such a boring man. No girl is ever going to like you if you talk like that. Like me? I folded my arms across my chest. I don't need meaningless affection. Don't tell me you're one of those protagonists from novels. Emma teased, the kind who says, women only get in the way of cultivation if all you can offer is warming my bed. I replied, then sure, you could say that. What I need isn't someone who can only warm my bed. I need someone who can fight through every obstacle beside me. We're going to face a lot in the future, including plenty of things far more dangerous than what happened last time. I can promise I'll always be the one standing in front. But even a tiger has moments when it slips. So if you want me to say something romantic, then the most romantic thing I can tell you is to get ready for tonight's cultivation and make yourself stronger. What I'm giving you isn't just the genetic material that could get you pregnant. I'm giving you my spiritual energy too. Okay, Emma stopped arguing. She simply nodded in silence. Maybe the man in front of her would never become the Prince Charming a young girl dreamed about. But she'd already lived through 2 lifetimes, and she was no longer some little girl lost in fantasies. Maybe it was time she learned from the man in front of her and started seriously thinking about reality. Speaking of which, Emma suddenly thought of something. Did you do something? About my dad? What happened? I asked. Well, Emma said, I heard my dad is under investigation. Oh, I nodded. My adoptive dad might have decided to teach him a lesson. Or he might have gotten caught up in the fallout from what happened last time. Either way, I don't really care. Come on, let's go pick out some jade and gemstones. Emma's face immediately turned even redder. Wait, wasn't that supposed to happen tonight? What are you imagining? I rolled my eyes at her. Once we finish setting all this stuff up, it'll already be dark. We need to choose spirit stones, pick out jade and gemstones, then buy everything else needed for the formation, and actually set it all up. By the time we finish everything, it'll probably be nighttime. If we don't start preparing now, it'll be way too late by tonight. Even if our current conditions aren't ideal, we still need to maximize every bit of spiritual energy we can use. While I started making preparations elsewhere, Lucas wandered through the streets with 300 yuan in his pocket. Having learned almost everything he knew about life off the mountain from novels, he had absolutely no idea how badly he'd screwed up. Crack! Boom! Gongs and drums thundered loudly. The sound of firecrackers and drums caught Lucas's attention. He turned his head and saw a newly opened store. Curious, he walked over. Pegasus Electric assisted bicycles. The storefront was extremely simple. Just an ordinary little shop, with a pile of vehicles resembling electric motorcycles displayed inside and outside. The sign above the store displayed its name, Pegasus Electric Assisted Bicycles. Isn't this basically an electric motorcycle? Lucas curiously examined one of the vehicles and muttered to himself, but it's seriously cheap. There had been nothing like this on the mountain, and he'd only encountered modern transportation after coming down. He didn't understand much about vehicles like these. But even he knew electric motorcycles were normally fairly expensive. Yet the one in front of him looked simpler, more basic, almost like an electric motorcycle with pedals attached. And somehow it was ridiculously cheap. Only 2,600 yuan. Even though Lucas had never bought an electric motorcycle before, he could tell the 2,600 yuan was incredibly inexpensive. Gunnar brother. At that moment, a woman wearing a black leather jacket appeared beside Lucas. She had the bold, carefree energy of a total tomboy. Without warning, she slapped Lucas hard on the back. You came down the mountain without even telling your senior sister? Senior sister? Lucas sucked in a sharp breath. From the impact, she really hadn't held back. He almost stumbled forward. Vanessa, why are you still like this? Lucas complained as he looked at the woman in front of him. Vanessa Cole, his second senior marshal sister, the very same underground queen of Linjiang district he'd bragged about. Haha, Vanessa threw an arm around Lucas. What have you been doing these past 2 days? Before Lucas could even answer, Vanessa looked toward the store. You like this thing? I'll buy you one. Vanessa really was incredibly generous. And straightforward, she saw the 2,600 yuan price tag and didn't think twice. She simply bought one. This actually looks pretty useful. That guy really does have a good head on his shoulders. Can't believe he came up with something like this. Gee, Creek. Lucas immediately caught the key detail. You know the owner of this place. Senior's sister? Vanessa looked even more surprised. Junior brother? You don't know him? What? Lucas scratched his head. Who is he? Why should I know him? Oh, Vanessa suddenly remembered that her junior brother had only just returned. So she explained, this business belongs to your future brother-in-law. His factory is right here in Linjiang district. I heard he invested more than 10 million yuan and opened several stores. This is just the smallest and most basic one. There are 2 larger stores that haven't opened yet. More than 10 million? Lucas froze. Money hadn't meant much to him while he lived on the mountain. But after coming down, he'd gradually begun to understand its value. 10 million yuan was an amount he had never even come close to seeing in his entire life. Then he touched the 300 yuan in his own pocket. Happiness was born from comparison, and apparently so were resentment and jealousy. What's wrong? Vanessa noticed the change in Lucas's expression and asked in confusion, Junior brother, don't tell me you've already gotten into trouble with that guy. Is he really that powerful? Lucas could hear a trace of wariness in Vanessa's voice. Powerful? Not exactly. Hey, Vanessa frowned slightly, but that guy is ruthless and frighteningly good at setting traps for people. He's cold-blooded, that's for sure. Don't tell me you really clashed with him. Yeah. Lucas's expression grew even uglier. Something happened yesterday. I ended up at some police station. I was trying to save someone, but those ignorant idiots had no idea what I was doing. They accused me of causing trouble and tried to stop me, so I barely fought back, but then they refused to let it go, and even called the police. Apparently, the police know that guy pretty well, so they called him over. He showed up, acted all high and mighty in front of me, and started ordering me around. He even tried to stop me from seeing my biological parents, and even though he clearly had the ability to get me out of there, he didn't do anything. I think he's completely won my parents over too. Like he's put some kind of curse on them. They don't care about their biological son at all. They only care about him. That cold-blooded bastard has completely fooled my parents. I had no idea that Lucas had already met his second senior martial sister, and I didn't care to know because it wasn't important. The moment I learned Lucas had run back home last night, I already knew what was going to happen. He had already begun consuming the love and guilt my adoptive parents felt toward him. In this world, no emotion appeared out of nowhere, and none of them lasted forever. They were built little by little through repeated actions, and likewise with every mistake. They could slowly be worn away until nothing remained. I wondered what expression my adoptive dad would make when he discovered his biological son had become a fugitive. It would probably be something to see. And I also wondered just how badly Lucas would eventually destroy his own situation. As for that second senior sister, if she behaved herself, she could keep being her so-called underground queen. And if she didn't, that was fine too. There were plenty of people eager to take her place. At the same time, I wasn't particularly worried about my electric motorcycle business. At its core, this industry lived or died by government policy, or more accurately, by the attitude of the authorities. It reminded me of something a waste recycling businessman had once said in my previous life. Plenty of people saw how profitable the industry was, but what they failed to see was how unique the industry itself was. If I entered it, I could make money. If you entered it, you could get destroyed. The electric motorcycle industry was exactly like that right now. With the strategy I was using at the moment, I could only operate this way in Zhonghai and Guangnan province, and I couldn't keep relying on the same strategy forever. My current plan was to first use electric motorcycles to rapidly expand my retail network and establish the brand. The second step would be gradually upgrading the electric motorcycles, but the core principle would still be convenient everyday transportation. The third step would be developing small electric cars based on that technology, similar to the tiny Wuling mini EVs from my previous life. Then I'd continue upgrading from there, gradually expanding into hatchbacks, sedans, and commercial vehicles. If everything went smoothly, I'd eventually have both the capital and technical foundation to invest in the future intelligent technology industry. And as my business empire gradually took shape, I could use the capital I'd gradually accumulated to search for and purchase more pseudo-spirit stones, or buy larger quantities of higher quality jade and gemstones. Our first stop was the courthouse, where I met the contact Uncle Wilson had arranged and spent 1 million yuan on a huge batch of jade and gemstones. After that, I went to buy some plants that could easily be transformed into spirit plants. Emma had assumed I'd choose some kind of exotic flowers or rare herbs or other precious materials, but my choice completely surprised her. Sunflowers. More precisely, mature sunflower heads, already covered in seeds. This plant was extremely easy to transform into a spirit plant. Emma stared in disbelief at the 6 huge sunflowers I'd bought. You're not joking, are you? Actually, if conditions allowed, what I'd really want is rice. I explained. Rice and millet are both crops that originated locally, after generations of cultivation and selective breeding. They're extremely suitable for transforming into spirit plants, but I don't know how to grow millet. And as for rice, modern hybrid rice generally can't preserve its seed traits. Even if you save the seeds and plant them again, they'll degenerate. That degeneration could cause a hard-earned spirit plant to revert back into an ordinary plant. So I'm going to start with sunflowers. Sunflowers are also fairly good at absorbing spiritual energy and transforming into spirit plants. Emma asked curiously. Really? Not exactly. I shook my head. They're just cheap, plentiful, and ridiculously easy to take care of. I remembered when I'd first joined the police force in my previous life and worked at a local precinct. There had been a small patch of land beside the station that the department required us to keep landscaped. So my coworkers grew all kinds of vegetables there, including sunflowers. My main memory of those things was that you tossed the seeds into the dirt, and the sunflowers basically grew by themselves. I'd seen coworkers watering and taking care of vegetables, but I never once saw anyone specifically tending the sunflowers. Those things were basically weeds that happened to have some value. The only care my coworkers ever gave them was making sure they didn't accidentally pull the sunflowers out while weeding. Most importantly, once we grow them, we can eat them. I pointed at the sunflowers. There are 2 reasons to grow spirit plants. First, they can improve the concentration of spiritual energy and generate more of it. Second, they're either eaten or used as medicine, whether we eat them directly or refine them into pills. The ultimate purpose is to improve our constitutions and increase our cultivation. Medicinal ingredients suitable for pill refinement are extremely hard to find right now, and ordinary herbs are basically useless to us. So, for people like us, the best spirit plants are cheap, abundant, and easy to obtain. Things like these, according to my plan. Step 1 is building a spirit gathering formation inside the room. Step 2 is using spiritual energy generated through dual cultivation to nurture more pseudo-spirit stones and spirit plants. Step 3 is using those spirit stones and spirit plants to build a larger spirit gathering formation. Then we'll dual cultivate inside that and repeat the cycle over and over. Seriously, Emma didn't even know how to respond. Then how do other cultivators normally cultivate? They rely on pseudo-spirit stones, I replied, if they're wealthy enough. They use huge amounts of electricity to create pseudo-spirit stones. Then when they cultivate, they absorb the spiritual energy stored inside those stones, but they never drain them completely. They usually leave about 20% of the spiritual energy inside. Then they carry those pseudo-spirit stones with them and slowly nourish them with their own spiritual energy, spirit stones. As long as you don't completely exhaust the spiritual energy inside them and turn them back into ordinary jade or gemstones, will slowly absorb spiritual energy from their surroundings and store it. People say this era is suffering from spiritual energy depletion, but depletion isn't entirely accurate. There is still a small amount of spiritual energy in the world. It's just that cultivators can't. directly absorb and use it the way they once could. I continued explaining. But pseudo-spirit stones that have already been transformed can slowly absorb some of it. And even when cultivators aren't deliberately doing anything, their bodies naturally release tiny traces of spiritual energy, which those pseudo-spirit stones can absorb as well. So the process repeats continuously, allowing them to cultivate again later. Of course, the biggest problem with that method is that it's painfully slow. Emma looked at me curiously. Then, hasn't anyone tried the method you're using before? Of course they have, I glanced at her. But cultivators using this method basically have two choices. The first is using their own spiritual energy to guide their dual cultivation partner onto the path of cultivation. But without a special constitution like yours, the amount of spiritual energy generated through dual cultivation isn't actually that much. It's quite limited. And for cultivators, spiritual energy is an incredibly scarce resource right now. A cultivation partner, on the other hand, isn't nearly as scarce. So most cultivators have to decide whether they're really willing to spend their own spiritual energy, nurturing their cultivation partner first, and then dual cultivating together so their partner can eventually feed energy back to them. The second method is raising a cultivation furnace. And as for what happens to a cultivation furnace, you've been reading novels lately, haven't you? I don't know if you've read any fantasy cultivation stories, but real cultivation furnaces end up in pretty much the same situation. I paused and thought for a moment. Actually, if one side knows some kind of evil cultivation technique, being discarded after they're finished with you would already count as lucky. Cultivators who use evil techniques can drain a furnace's life force, blood, flesh, everything, without leaving anything behind. There's another problem. If the furnace is an ordinary person, they won't live long afterward. And the spiritual energy they provide is minimal, which means you'd need a huge number of them. People with special constitutions are slightly better, but a furnace's ending is never good. So this isn't some simple matter of men and women having fun, and it's not something you can solve just by throwing money at women. After all, money can always be earned again after you lose it. But once someone's life is gone, it's gone. Especially with something like this, where the victim obviously has no chance of walking away with money afterward. That's why raising cultivation furnaces has always been directly tied to human trafficking, and inevitably involves unlawful imprisonment, and even criminal cases involving death. I looked at Emma. Your constitution is special. If they capture you, you'll basically have two choices. Either they imprison you and force you to become their cultivation furnace, or you cooperate and become one willingly. Either way, you'll basically be locked away somewhere until the day you die. We're lucky the times have changed, and certain things can't be done openly anymore. They have to operate in secret. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't even have this brief period of safety. The times were different. The way power operated and the logic behind it were completely different too. The other side probably hadn't expected their plan to fail, and was likely trying to sever every connection first, before making another move after the investigation ended. Otherwise, someone would have definitely come asking questions about the two pseudo-spirit stones I'd taken. Emma looked genuinely frightened now. Don't think I'm exaggerating just to scare you, I said. You'll understand eventually. Let's head back. Once we returned to the small apartment, I moved the bed into the middle of the living room. Then around the bed, I arranged pieces of jade and gemstones one after another. The jade and gemstones formed a special, but extremely simple formation. Then I placed the two pseudo-spirit stones I'd obtained into the formation's two core nodes. At the same time, I scattered the sunflowers throughout the formation as well. That's it? Emma stared at the jade and gemstones scattered all over the floor. They didn't seem to follow any obvious pattern, not even close. I looked down at the formation. I can't draw. Proper formations need formation patterns engraved into them, and drawing formation patterns, especially commonly used permanent formations, requires a pretty serious foundation in art. Even without natural artistic talent, you'd still need to spend a long time practicing the patterns. And I was currently facing almost the exact same problem I'd encountered when drawing talismans last time. I had all the knowledge and knew exactly how it was supposed to work. But My hands couldn't do it because I couldn't properly engrave the formation patterns. The effectiveness of this temporary arrangement was drastically reduced. This won't work. I scratched my head. Looks like I'm going to have to seriously learn how to draw. Then another thought suddenly occurred to me. I looked at Emma. I remember you're about to start your senior year of high school, right? What university are you planning to apply to? How about studying art? You could help me draw talismans and set up formations in the future. Emma looked awkward. Well, about that, my grades used to be pretty good, but after being reborn, they became terrible, so I don't plan on going to college. Inside the spacious apartment, my hands rapidly formed one hand seal after another. I wasn't very good at drawing talismans or setting up formations, but the original owner of this body had practiced hand seals diligently. Every gesture was precise, and not a single one was missed. As I formed the seals, I quietly recited the incantation. Heaven and earth without limit. Qian and Kun, lend me your power. 8 trigrams, reveal your spirit. Yin and Yang unite in harmony. Qian is heaven, Kun is earth. Zhen is thunder, Zun is wind. Kan is water, Li is fire. Zhen is mountain, Dui is lake. Spiritual energy from all 8 directions, heed my command. Azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, black tortoise. 4 guardians, take your positions. Spiritual energy from the 4 directions, gather here. Spirit gathering formation, rise. The next second, blue-green light flashed throughout the entire room before gradually fading away. Wow. Although Emma had heard a few mysterious stories about cultivation in her previous life, she had never actually seen anything like this. This was her first time witnessing it in this life. Emma stared around the room. Every piece of jade and gemstone had flashed with light. It had only lasted for an instant, but she could clearly feel that something about the room had changed. The air itself seemed refreshing and invigorating. Is this what it feels like when spiritual energy becomes abundant? Emma asked curiously. She could no longer see the jade and gemstones glowing, but she could still observe the hairpin and jade plaque serving as pseudo-spirit stones, placed inside the formation's 2 core nodes. Faint streams of strange blue-green light flowed out of them. Then, slightly darker light slowly flowed back in. It was extremely faint, but those lights were probably spiritual energy gathering inside the formation. Abundant? I touched the jade bracelet on my wrist. Theoretically, if we set this formation up in the mountains, the spiritual energy would be much richer. At this level, it's better than nothing at best. The mountains? Emma's face instantly turned bright red. That you should prepare yourself mentally, I said. We're definitely going eventually, but I'll set up protective formations beforehand. It's not just because I don't want anyone seeing us. In this era, a cultivation site rich in spiritual energy would be enough to make plenty of other cultivators take desperate risks. Get on. I pointed toward the large bed at the center of the formation. Oh, okay, TJ's. Even though she'd already mentally prepared herself, Emma still shuffled forward in tiny steps. The bed wasn't even 2 meters away. Yet somehow, it took her 10 whole minutes to reach it. Then she slowly began removing her clothes, until only the final layer remained. Emma tried to say something, but I had already leaned over her, cutting her off. I'll try to be gentle, and one more reminder. Each session lasts 1 hour, with a 30-minute break in between. 7 times? Emma's eyes widened. 7. You should be able to handle it, right? Even I wasn't completely confident. 7 one-hour sessions with only 30-minute breaks. Even with cultivation involved, that sounded brutal. At least with my current strength. This is cultivation. I emphasized again, both for Emma and for myself. Train through the hottest days of summer and the coldest days of winter. Cultivation was never supposed to be easy. Remember how the spiritual energy moves through your body. Let's begin. We'll skip over the part no one needs to watch, along with roughly 3,000 words of plot. Meanwhile, another scene was unfolding at the Reed family home. Or more accurately, while I was out buying supplies, something else was already happening there. As around noon, bang, 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 a violent pounding on the door startled Linda Reed while she was writing a research paper. Coming! There was no need to guess. They had been married for decades, so she knew exactly who it was from the sound alone. And if he was pounding on the door like that, there could only be one explanation. Someone was furious. Extremely furious. Linda hurried over and opened the door. Sure enough, her husband stood outside with a terrifyingly dark expression. Without waiting for Linda to say anything, he strode straight inside and headed directly toward their son's bedroom. David! Linda immediately realized something was wrong, and a terrible feeling rose inside her. Bang! Her husband had always respected their son's privacy, but today, he practically slammed the bedroom door open. The moment he saw the room was empty, his anger exploded. Where is that brat? What happened? Linda hurried after him. Calm down. Did Lucas do something wrong? He only just came home. Son? David Reed roared. He's not my son. He's my damn father. I'm the one acting like his son. After shouting that, David seemed to lose every ounce of strength in his body. He collapsed onto the bed and let out a long, exhausted sigh. What exactly happened? Seeing him like this, Linda immediately realized their biological son must have gotten himself into serious trouble. She hurriedly asked, David, just tell me. Stop sitting there sighing. What am I supposed to say? David replied anxiously. I can't explain everything right now. Do you have that brat's phone number? Call him immediately and tell him, no matter what he's doing right now, this second, he needs to get back to Long High Road Police Station as fast as possible. He needs to go back exactly the way he came out. Call him now. Don't ask what happened yet. If we wait any longer, nobody will be able to help him. When Lucas left the police station, he hadn't simply walked out without making any preparations, although he didn't understand much about life off the mountain. The novels he'd read had mentioned basic police institutions like local stations, so he understood the general idea. Once someone was brought inside, they weren't supposed to leave without police permission. But he'd also read novels, where characters left a puppet behind, while the real person went outside to have fun. Then if something happened, they simply came back. So, Lucas copied the same trick. Inside the dorm room, he arranged blankets and pillows into the shape of a person, then attached an illusion talisman to it. It was similar to a concealment talisman, with a limited hypnotic and deceptive effect. It could create a crude illusion, while subtly influencing the observer's mind, causing someone looking at the object carrying the illusion talisman to perceive whatever the talisman user wanted them to perceive. Of course, there was one condition. The object carrying the talisman had to physically resemble whatever it was supposed to imitate as closely as possible. Likewise, this kind of low-level talisman was useless against cultivators and against people with strong willpower, or someone deliberately searching for something specific. Its effect was also limited. Lucas was highly skilled with techniques like these, so the talismans he made, even without any divine blessing, were still extremely effective. Far beyond the average level of modern talisman practitioners. They were practically top tier. Unfortunately, Lucas had simply copied a plot from a novel, and people had already given a name. This kind of blindly copying formulas, book worship. It was one of the easiest ways to screw everything up. Lucas had never considered why he'd been allowed to stay in a dorm room instead of being locked in an actual holding room. It was because the police were showing respect to his parents and also giving face to the municipal bureau. That morning, an officer brought him breakfast and called for him to wake up and eat. Naturally, the fake figure didn't respond. What Lucas also failed to realize was that the only reason nothing happened until noon was because I'd said I would try to negotiate the matter. So at first, no one at the station suspected anything, and they simply left him alone. But by noon, they noticed his breakfast hadn't been touched, and he still didn't respond when called. That was when they realized something was wrong. No matter how good Lucas's illusion talisman was, a pile of blankets was still not a living person. Once the officers sensed something was off, a closer inspection immediately exposed the trick. When Chief Lewis discovered Lucas had escaped and realized he'd effectively been played for a fool, he nearly exploded with rage. But fortunately, he managed to restrain himself. After all, Lucas was David Reed's biological son, and David Reed was an old war buddy of Michael Mitchell. If the matter could still be handled privately, that was preferable, especially while things hadn't blown up too badly yet. and formal mediation hadn't even begun. So Chief Lewis immediately contacted Michael Mitchell privately, and then called David Reed, no matter what happened. They needed to get Lucas back first. As long as he returned, everything could still be discussed. But if he refused to come back, then a lot of things would become much harder to handle, especially with Arthur Bennett involved. The Art Association might not have had much actual authority, but artists depended heavily on publicity, which meant they naturally knew plenty of people in the media. If Arthur said even a few words to his media contacts, there would be no chance of containing the fallout. By coincidence, David Reed had also gone to see Michael Mitchell, partly because Lucas's household registration needed to be sorted out, and partly because after talking with his son yesterday, David had begun to suspect that Lucas, disappearing all those years ago, might not have been an accident. Someone might have deliberately targeted his son, from his disappearance to being taken in by the old Taoist on Mount Zhongnan. David couldn't shake the feeling that there had been some kind of conspiracy behind it. He wanted to learn more about what had happened back then, and ask Michael to help investigate. Instead, he ran into Chief Lewis at the Municipal Bureau and learned everything Lucas had done. David nearly exploded on the spot. After spending decades navigating politics and finally reaching retirement safely, he didn't even need instinct to immediately understand what would happen if this wasn't handled properly. Then he came home and discovered his biological son was gone, and his heart sank even further. "Call him right now," David said helplessly. "Linda, I'm going to the Bennett family first." With that, David stood up. A look of determination flashed through his eyes. "Tell him he has two choices. Either he gets back to the police station immediately, or he can wait for me to personally send him to prison." "Prison?" Linda stared at him in shock. "David, that's your biological son." "Exactly because he's my son," David snapped, both furious and helpless. "I refuse to become another parent, destroyed by blindly protecting his child. I worked my entire life just to retire safely. I'm not about to spend retirement having people point at my back and curse me, and this is already far worse than just being cursed behind my back." "What a disaster." David stood up. "Call him, now." But Lucas had absolutely no idea that he was slowly throwing away every chance he had to fix the situation. He was currently at the welcome banquet Vanessa had arranged for him, eating and drinking, while meeting people from the local underground scene. Bzzzt. His phone suddenly vibrated. He pulled it out and looked. It was a call from his biological mother. "What is it, junior brother?" "Daz." Vanessa's cheeks were slightly flushed from drinking, making her look far more alluring than usual. When she saw Lucas take out his phone, she casually asked, "Who's calling?" "My family." Lucas hesitated over whether to answer. "Your family?" A faint, mocking smile appeared on Vanessa's face. "When they were humiliating you, why didn't they remember you were their biological son? Did they finally realize you're the real one? Or did they finally recognize your value and start regretting everything?" Parents like that, and a family like that, you should think carefully before deciding whether they're worth going back to. Why go back to a family like that? They've got a little political power, so what? Some retired old man still thinks he can act superior to Mr. Reed. With Mr. Reed's talent, he'll dominate all of Jinghai someday. No, all of Guangnan province. In Dest, exactly. Why bother going back to a family like that? Surrounded by one flattering comment after another, Lucas rejected the call, then turned off his phone. Back on the mountain, his master and his senior martial sisters had always treated him sincerely. If there was something to say, they said it directly. They never talked in circles, and they never hid unpleasant truths just because he wouldn't like hearing them. So Lucas had never realized that in the outside world, some people were extremely skilled at reading others, and would only say whatever they knew you wanted to hear. Unfortunately, the people Vanessa had invited today weren't high-ranking officials or major tycoons. They were mid-level managers from various institutions and owners of mid-sized companies with roughly 1,000 to 2,000 employees. People like them, especially those important enough to sit at the main table, were masters at reading the room. Vanessa's original thinking had been simple. These people might not have the fame of Jianghai's top officials or richest businessmen, and they might not be fabulously wealthy, but there was an old saying that minor officials were often harder to deal with than major ones, And sometimes, local connections mattered more than distant authority. If her junior brother got to know these people first, it would make getting things done much easier later. If he ever wanted to start a company, knowing these small and mid-sized business owners would also give him a strong foundation for future cooperation. At the same time, Lucas's biological dad was a retired provincial-level official, which gave him a powerful background. And on top of that, his parents' adopted son was a biological member of the Carter family, even though Tyler was currently in conflict with the Carters, and had already caused them enormous losses. The Carter family's Sunrise Group was still a local business giant, with that kind of background. What Lucas needed most was to build good relationships with people at the local and middle levels, and establish roots for himself. But then Vanessa swept her gaze across everyone at the table, and suddenly felt that things were drifting far away from what she'd intended. Her goal had never been to make her junior brother genuinely turn against his family. She only wanted Lucas, when forced to choose between family and their sect, to lean a little more toward the sect. That was enough. If conflict arose, she simply wanted him to believe the sect treated him better than his family did. But if Lucas truly cut off his family completely, that wasn't what their master wanted, and it wasn't what Vanessa wanted either. Vanessa understood perfectly well that, in this era of returning spiritual energy, the key to becoming an underground queen wasn't the few spells she could still use, or even her fighting ability. It was judgment, knowing exactly whose power she needed to attach herself to, if she wanted to rise even higher and become the underground queen of all Jianghai, instead of merely Linjiang district. Then Lucas needed to return to his original family. But right now, whatever motives these people around the table had, she absolutely couldn't let them keep pouring fuel on the fire. Vanessa's elegant features hardened. Her presence immediately became intimidating. She slapped her glass down on the table and became the first person to change her tone. What are you all talking about? What I'm trying to say is, every family has problems outsiders can't understand. They may have done things you can't accept, but they're still your family. You're an adult now. Some things need more careful thought. Don't let the fact that they're your biological parents blind you either way. And if your family calls you, no matter why they're calling, you shouldn't simply hang up. Doing that will only make people think. Master failed miserably in raising you. Failed? Lucas replied with complete confidence. Senior sister, what are you talking about? Didn't Master say? I'm the most talented disciple in our entire sect. I'm the best at everything I learn. And in the future, I'll inherit Master's position as sect leader and carry on our lineage. And I will definitely restore the glory of our sacred sect. When the coming age of great struggle begins, everyone here can rest assured, as long as all of you support me. I'll bring every one of you onto the path of immortality someday. Looking at Lucas, overflowing with confidence, Vanessa frowned even harder. Their master had spoiled her junior brother far too much. She studied Lucas's confident, flamboyant expression. No, this wasn't merely flamboyant. It was arrogance, bordering on outright delusion. For the first time, a sense of danger stirred inside Vanessa. She was Lucas's second senior martial sister, skilled in divination and mystical arts, and she had descended the mountain alongside their eldest and third senior sisters. He still remembered the day they'd said goodbye at the mountain gate. Her junior brother had been so cheerful, so bright, and so confidently optimistic. But why did the Lucas in front of her now feel so completely different from the boy she'd known back then? They were clearly the same person, yet the two images simply refused to overlap. He still seemed to possess that same innocent simplicity. So why did he now come across like a complete idiot? Vanessa suddenly regretted holding this welcome banquet and introducing her junior brother to these people. She didn't know exactly what had gone wrong, but could he truly not hear the provocation and manipulation hidden inside these people's words? Not even a little? For the second half of the banquet, Vanessa barely said a word. It was almost as though she'd handed complete control of the room over to her junior brother. She watched him speak confidently, watched him make promises to everyone, and watched him bask in the endless stream of words tailored to flatter him, until he was practically floating with pride. After the banquet finally ended, "Junior brother, Vanessa looked deeply worried. How could you make promises like that so casually? The coming age of great struggle may be approaching, but that struggle also means a great calamity. We don't even know when it will begin, or what form it will take. If you keep making promises like that, can you really bear the consequences someday? And, junior brother, people can be dangerous. Can't you tell that some of those people clearly have ulterior motives? Lucas laughed, looking completely confident. They're just promises. I never said I absolutely had to fulfill every one of them. Besides, I'm someone blessed with tremendous fortune. What could a little karma like that possibly matter? And I'm not an idiot either. How could I not hear what they were doing? I have my own plans. After all, he'd already read plenty of novels. Someone with overwhelming luck like him was supposed to succeed at whatever he did, just like the protagonists in those stories. Wherever the protagonist went, didn't people always swarm around him, flattering him and kissing up to him, just like today? What was strange about that? Sure, some protagonists in novels were constantly questioned and mocked, but those people were always villains, or disposable side characters who weren't on the protagonist's side. As for the people who stood with the protagonist, weren't they supposed to flatter and protect him? So what was there to worry about? Vanessa clenched her teeth, but ultimately swallowed the harsher words she'd wanted to say. She didn't want to crush her junior brother's confidence. Dee could only hope he truly had some kind of plan. After thinking for a moment, Vanessa asked, "Then what exactly is your plan, junior brother?" She and two other senior sisters had descended the mountain ahead of him, essentially to serve as the advance party. Once their junior brother arrived, his immense fortune, combined with the support of that destiny, Diaz and their sex assistants, was supposed to help them establish themselves in Zhenghai, the place their divination predicted would experience the first major resurgence of spiritual energy. They needed to establish a firm foothold and seize the advantage early. So, Vanessa genuinely wanted to know what plan her junior brother had come up with. Lottery tickets, stocks, and then gambling in Changshan and Macau. Lucas answered with complete confidence. He'd already read the novels, and that was how most protagonists made money. They built up their first pool of capital, then used that money to establish their own power base. Lucas had already thought it through. With his incredible luck, combined with Vanessa's divination abilities, turning the 300 yuan in his pocket into 30 billion shouldn't be difficult at all. The moment Vanessa heard that, her expression collapsed. She'd been living in the outside world for quite some time, and understood far more about how things actually worked. With her junior brother's luck, he might indeed make a decent amount from lottery tickets, and could possibly obtain a substantial amount of startup capital very quickly. But stocks, a small fry like Lucas jumping into that market, whether domestic or overseas, would probably get devoured without even leaving bones behind. And going to Changshan or Macau? That was even more ridiculous. Could he win money there? Maybe. But whether he'd still be winning by the following week was an entirely different question. As an underground queen, Vanessa understood far more about those places than her junior brother ever could, against real casinos and veteran gamblers. It was impossible to know who would end up being the sheep led to slaughter of his three-step plan. The only reliable and genuinely profitable option was the lottery, and that could at least be calculated through divination. Wait, Vanessa suddenly remembered something. After hearing about what happened to the Carter family, she had cast a hexagram too. The upper trigram had been Sun, and the lower trigram Jin, forming the wind-thunder beneficial hexagram. Its fortune remained uncertain. Only cautious action and staying on the proper path could bring peace. Yet her junior brother was acting like this. I have a pair of invisible wings. And just then, Vanessa's phone suddenly rang. She picked it up and looked at the screen. Her heart jolted. What happened? Lucas asked curiously. Nothing. Vanessa stood up. I have something to take care of. I won't be able to stay with you today. With that, she hurried away and headed for Tianshui Grand Hotel in Linjiang District, on the 8th floor, outside room 823. Vanessa knocked on the door. After a short wait, the door opened. Vanessa glanced around, then slipped inside. Daniel, didn't I tell you we shouldn't meet for a while? Even if you wanted to see me, now isn't the right time. Did anyone follow you? The man who had opened the door was none other than Daniel Carter, chief of the Linjiang District Public Security Bureau. He was sitting in a chair with a grave expression, his entire posture tense, as he asked cautiously, "How could anyone possibly follow me?" Vanessa replied, with equal confidence. "Did your wife find out?" "Impossible." Daniel's expression darkened even further. "That woman isn't smart enough to figure it out. And stop acting like we're that close. You know perfectly well what kind of relationship we have. I called you here because I want to ask you something. How did you offend that young man from the Reed family?" "The Reed family's young master?" Duh. Vanessa looked confused. "Do you mean the real one or the fake one?" "I've never even met the fake heir before, and the real heir is my junior brother. I just met him earlier today." "Real heir? Fake heir?" Daniel looked genuinely surprised, then seemed to realize something. He immediately stood up. "Are you planning to side with the real heir or the fake one?" Vanessa looked even more confused. They seemed to have some conflict between them. "My plan was to keep both sides under control." Daniel answered coldly, "Forget it. I've heard a few things, but the information isn't completely reliable. This isn't a situation where you can play both sides. If you're planning to back the real heir, I suggest you leave immediately. Get out of Jianghai." "The fake heir came to see me yesterday, and he was already testing me. When two giants fight, the fisherman profits." Vanessa suddenly understood why those people at the banquet had been deliberately stirring things up. There were plenty of ways to move upward. You could earn merit yourself, or wait for someone above you to make a mistake, or you could wait until two powerful people tore each other apart and see what opportunities fell out for people at their level. If the Reed family's real and fake heirs fought badly enough, then maybe some small opportunities would open up for them at their level. The final outcome might not affect them much, but if the people above exposed weaknesses during the fight, those openings could matter. If nothing fell into their hands, they simply stayed where they were. But if they caught something, they could rise another step. And judging from what she'd seen today, her junior brother clearly held resentment toward his biological parents. But what exactly had happened? Vanessa's thoughts churned. What's going on? My junior brother only arrived in Shanghai recently. How did things get this bad already? Even if there was some conflict, it shouldn't have escalated this far. And whatever happened between them is still a family dispute. Why would the fake heir specifically come looking for you? I don't know all the details yet, Dana replied. The matter is being kept quiet for now. It apparently happened over in the high-tech district, so it isn't convenient for me to ask too many questions. But one thing is certain. Starting now, you need to completely cut ties with that junior brother of yours and pretend you know nothing about what happened today. But otherwise, you're abandoning me? Vanessa's expression instantly darkened. Daniel Carter, you're actually going to throw me away? Daniel gave a cold laugh. Do you know something? When that young man from the Reed family came to see me, he brought Michael Mitchell's useless son with him. He asked whether I wanted to eat fish. Do you know what that meant? Without waiting for Vanessa to answer, Daniel gave her the answer himself. Before Deputy Chief Wilson over in Binhai District got promoted, he had a meal with that fake heir from the Reed family. They ate seasonal vegetables, and he was even allowed to pack some up and take them back for everyone at his bureau. Last night, I turned him down and told him I was allergic to fish. You don't have to believe me, but right now, all I'd have to do is make one phone call and tell him I've decided I want fish, and I'd immediately be able to catch one hell of a big fish. Daniel stared coldly at Vanessa. The fact that I came to see you today is already me honoring whatever feelings existed between us all these years. I don't care what you're thinking. And I don't care how close you are to that junior brother of yours. Daniel stood up and walked toward the door. Refusing to eat the fish is already the most I can do for you. But I have no intention of becoming the fish served on the table. And what about your eldest senior sister? Have you never wondered why she didn't go with you? Click. The door shut. Daniel Carter was gone. He had been completely decisive, more decisive than Vanessa had ever seen him before. There hadn't been the slightest trace of tenderness, or even a moment of hesitation. So what exactly had happened? Vanessa suddenly realized something. Her junior brother might not be as simple and innocent as he seemed, Had he hidden some extremely important information from her? But he was still her junior brother, and she had orders from the sect. He carried the future of their entire lineage, and was essential to the sect's plans. Still, no, Vanessa struggled with herself for a long time. The sect's orders were important, but her own future mattered too. And the hexagram she'd calculated. Wind and thunder clashing. Fortune and disaster still undecided. Act cautiously and remain on the proper path. Only then could peace be preserved. After hesitating for a moment, Vanessa picked up her phone and called Lucas. The moment he answered, "Junior brother, my 12th granduncle's baby is about to celebrate its 1-month birthday." Yeah, my actual 12th granduncle. Seriously, with the way seniority works in the village. Some little baby somehow became my elder. How ridiculous is that? Vanessa immediately became enthusiastic. The village is telling me to hurry back. There are a lot of family rules on my side, so I can't skip it. How about this? I'll transfer you 100,000 yuan first. Use it to make your plans. If it isn't enough, call me. That's all. I'll hang up now. Beep. The call ended. Vanessa immediately opened a travel app and booked herself a plane ticket. As for the sect, she was grateful for being raised there, and grateful for everything they'd taught her. But as for the sect's plans and missions, she'd give Lucas 100,000 yuan and see how he handled things, if he could solve his own problems, and use that money to build something for himself. Then he might still be worth supporting. But if he couldn't, then if this was truly what the sect's future looked like, Vanessa needed to start thinking about her own future instead. Lucas stared at the bank notification on his phone, completely confused. But 100,000 yuan? That was actually pretty good. 300 from his parents for lottery tickets, and 100,000 from Vanessa for stocks. At this pace, it wouldn't even take more than a week for him to start making serious money. His master had told him that without money, it was almost impossible to survive in the outside world. Money, businesses, and connections could all be built step by step. Filled with confidence, Lucas had no intention of going home. He had absolutely no idea that he'd already stepped onto a very practical and reliable path. And before long, someone would teach him exactly what reality looked like. As for me, the timeline moved forward to the morning after my first dual cultivation session. At that moment, I was beginning to experience a morning that wasn't exactly pleasant. The important part of dual cultivation was the cultivation. I had pushed myself through 5 full rounds, and then I genuinely couldn't keep going. After all, I'd only barely stepped across the threshold of cultivation. My physical condition was only somewhat better than that of an ordinary person. As for Emma, she was still lying in bed, completely exhausted from everything we'd done, this cell, and still asleep. I, however, sat properly in the 5 hearts facing heaven posture, and cultivated for a while. Not bad, at least I supposed it wasn't bad, because there was still a gap between Emma and me. An entire night of dual cultivation. She helped me, far less than it helped her. I couldn't say it did absolutely nothing, but the improvement was extremely small, if I quantified it like an experience bar in a game, and converted cultivation into numbers. Then before dual cultivation, my progress toward the next stage was roughly 10 out of 100 after finishing the session. It was only around 11 out of 100. In other words, at this rate, I'd need roughly 100 rounds just to gain 1 full level. The moment I thought about that, my face practically turned green. If this was really the pace, there was no way my body could take it. Dual cultivation like this. Who the hell could survive it? Maybe I should just use some evil plundering technique instead. For a moment, a wicked thought actually rose inside me. But then I touched the jade bracelet and felt that the spiritual energy inside had become slightly denser than before. I sighed, and all those evil thoughts were immediately pushed back down. Evil methods might improve cultivation faster, but in the end, they definitely harm both others and myself. Besides, my cheat might not be impressive, but it wasn't non-existent either. After one night of dual cultivation, the spiritual energy we'd naturally released had refilled the bracelet. Actually, it hadn't been completely full in the first place. Mao, the bracelet, had absorbed the spiritual energy that dispersed during dual cultivation and contained about 1% more than it had at the beginning. That was enough to give me a little extra cultivation time. Thinking about that, I began cultivating again using the spiritual energy inside the bracelet. I kept absorbing it until the remaining energy approached a dangerous level. Then I stopped. Let's check the rest. I got out of bed and put on a robe. First, I checked the 2 pseudo-spirit stones inside the formation. Because their previous owners had already used them, there wasn't much spiritual energy left inside, and their quality was only average. If this were one of those cultivation novels, even after nurturing them to their absolute limit, it would still only count as low-grade spirit stones. But right now, with spiritual energy this scarce, even things like these were treasures. They recovered a little. I inspected the pseudo-spirit stones and muttered to myself, but it's still too slow. After checking the 2 pseudo-spirit stones, I examined the rest of the jade and gemstones. Not a single one showed any sign of changing. As expected, nurturing new spirit stones wasn't easy. Then, I walked over to the sunflowers and checked them one by one. This time, I was surprised. I stared at a sunflower positioned in the northeast corner of the formation and plucked out one seed. It changed. Seriously? I'm this lucky. What happened? Emma woke up at the sound of my voice. She sat up in bed, wrapped in a blanket, rubbing her sleepy eyes as she looked at me. Look at this. I hurried over in excitement and sat down on the bed. Look at this. It's a sunflower seed. Emma stared at it. It looks like it has spiritual energy? Exactly. In my eyes, the seed didn't look much different from all the others, but an extremely faint, almost imperceptible blue-green glow surrounded it. It counts as a mutation. I got back out of bed, grabbed another sunflower at random. The rest of these can be eaten. But we're keeping this seed. I'm going to plant it in a pot first, then leave it here so the spiritual energy can keep nurturing it. Technically, it wasn't truly a mutation yet. It was still far from becoming a spirit plant. Compared with ordinary sunflower seeds, it was simply better at absorbing and converting spiritual energy. And besides, the sunflowers sold on the market were hybrids too. If I planted this seed, the sunflower it produced would still show trait separation and some degree of degeneration. But I didn't need high yields right now. What I needed was mutation toward becoming a spirit plant. Once this seed was planted and grew into a sunflower, the seeds it produced would have a much greater chance of developing an even stronger ability to absorb and convert spiritual energy. And there would probably be several of them. If I cultivated them somewhere with relatively abundant spiritual energy, the probability would become even higher. More importantly, spiritual energy could accelerate plant growth. Once I had the first useful seed, as long as my luck wasn't so terrible that I'd choke just drinking water, I should always be able to harvest at least 1 or 2 good seeds. All I needed to do was keep selecting and breeding them. There's breeding and selecting. Once I entered that positive cycle, it probably wouldn't take too many years before I cultivated a genuine spirit plant. What? Years? Can't you make it any faster? Inside the office building in Linjiang District, I drank tea while reviewing yesterday's sales numbers and financial report. Sales weren't especially impressive. We'd only sold 2,000 units in one day. But that wasn't really a problem. There were no celebrity endorsements, no advertising campaign, and most people didn't even understand what the product was yet. So weak first-day sales were perfectly normal. Besides, I'd originally expected it to take about a week before the first sale came in. So selling 2,000 units on the very first day had already far exceeded my expectations. Sales would probably keep doubling from here. That meant I could continue with my original plan for the first 100,000 units, and then start expanding into surrounding towns and villages. Meanwhile, Emma was sitting nearby scrolling through her phone. Lately, she'd been reading True Air, Fake Air, and Switched, daughter novels, and she'd gotten completely hooked. But after thinking for a moment, she put down her phone, looked at me, and asked, "Did you do something to my dad?" "What?" I looked at her in surprise. "Why are you suddenly asking me that?" "Because what you told me doesn't match the novels." Emma's beautiful eyes blinked curiously as she asked like an inquisitive little kid. "According to the novels, by this point, shouldn't my brothers and mom and the fake daughter all be taking turns coming after me, saying things like, 'Just kneel down and apologize to the fake daughters, and maybe we'll graciously let you come home'?" But ever since I left, they haven't paid any attention to me at all. That's completely different from the novels. Sure, there are some stories where they don't realize until 3 or 4 days later that the real daughter ran away and only then start looking for her. But usually they find her pretty quickly. What do you think the reason is? Of course I knew exactly what was happening, but since she'd brought it up, I suddenly wanted to test her and see how she'd analyze the situation. They can't find me? Emma thought for a moment. In the novels, if the real daughter sneaks away, it usually takes the family a few days to notice that she's gone. But if she leaves right in front of them, they usually run into her at school. Of course, sometimes one of the brothers is especially capable and finds her almost immediately. So I think you probably did something that keeps them from finding me. Or maybe the plot hasn't reached that point yet. They might still think I'm just throwing a tantrum and that I'll go home after a few days. I was speechless. For some reason, I felt like Emma was slowly developing in the same direction as Lucas. I held back my urge to complain and said, I think, starting today, you should read fewer stories like that and spend more time with me, learning how the real world actually works. What? Emma looked surprised. Isn't that how things work? You're the one who recommended those books to me. That's not what I meant. I set down my teacup. Novels develop according to whatever logic the author thinks makes sense. But in reality, most things play out according to interests and incentives. I haven't done anything to your dad. I haven't even used the evidence I prepared. But unfortunately for him, he was too close to Rachel Carter. He even visited the Carter family the day before everything happened. I gave a faint, mocking smile. Rachel's case is basically like the Monkey King's Ruyi Jingu Bang. Do you remember how the novel describes that weapon? Emma shook her head. It weighs 13,500 Jin. Brush against it and you're injured. Take a direct hit and you're dead. I explained. Unfortunately, your biological dad got clipped by that giant staff. Right now, he's barely able to protect himself. Even if the Lin family had time to come looking for you, they'd be coming to beg you for help. That ridiculous novel plot simply isn't going to happen. Emma looked like she partly understood and partly didn't. But your second sister was turned by foreign intelligence and came back to work as a spy, right? Wasn't that matter already over? How did it become this serious? And novels always say officials protect other officials. That's exactly why I keep telling you to stop treating novels like reality. And definitely stop projecting their logic onto the real world. I took another sip of tea. Because reality is complicated. But in another sense, it's very simple. If protecting someone gives me a benefit, and that person has value to me, then I may have a reason to protect them. But in a case like this, if the investigators decided to protect your dad, what exactly would they gain? I don't know, but I do know what they'd risk. This case is huge, and it's caused an enormous stir. Even the central authorities know about it. So if I let him off, someone else will inevitably investigate. And once they discover that I let him off, I become a target of investigation too. But look at it from the opposite direction. A lot of people are watching your dad's position and hoping he'll get kicked out, so one of them can take his seat. If investigating your dad turns up something useful, that becomes political capital for them, even if it has nothing to do with this particular case. What if they uncover something else? I glanced at my phone and noticed a new message. It was from Ryan. Your dad was fine before because there was no real chance of turning him into someone else's achievement. There wasn't enough pressure from above. Even if someone reported him, he could use his connections and quietly make the matter disappear. Then everything would go back to normal. But now there's pressure from above, ambition from below, and people in the middle watching for any evidence they can use. So right now, all of his energy is being consumed by one investigation after another. If he comes looking for you, remember that even inside the government system, not everyone's interests are aligned. Once you become someone else's political achievement, instead of assuming everyone inside the system will protect each other, you'd be better off praying to every god you know and hoping one of them answers and gives you enough luck to survive. If your dad really comes, he won't be here to reenact some stupid web novel drama. He'll be here asking me to help him. I stood up. Though, personally, I think he'll probably make it through safely. Why? Emma asked. How old is your brother? I suddenly asked. The one serving in the Navy as a destroyer captain. Oh, Emma thought carefully. I think he's 26, maybe 27, or younger. 25 maybe. Yeah, I put on my coat. That's exactly why. Your dad may run into trouble, but he'll almost certainly survive it. Come on, I strode toward the door. I'm taking you to meet someone. Back in Linjiang District, at Song Dynasty Moonlight Restaurant, I rode my motorcycle, with Emma sitting behind me. We entered the restaurant and gave the private room number, then followed a server inside. The moment I pushed open the private room door, Uncle Samuel, sorry to keep you waiting. I immediately smiled and greeted him warmly. I was supposed to be the one hosting dinner this time, to properly thank you. But somehow I ended up making you wait for me. I'm really sorry. Really, I apologize. Don't say that. Samuel Brooks stood up too, with a broad smile. You're the one who's helped me, Tyler. You're embarrassing me by being this polite. This is my fiancée, Emma. I introduced Emma. Then I introduced Samuel to her. This is the police officer who helped rescue you the day you were kidnapped. Uncle Samuel, Emma greeted politely. What a perfect match. You two really do look great together. Samuel praised us warmly. We soon sat down and the dishes were served. The conversation began with casual small talk. There was no alcohol, but after several rounds of drinks, and once we'd sampled most of the dishes, I finally pulled a photograph from my pocket and slid it across the table to Samuel. Take a look. This one's a seriously big fish. Interested in helping me catch it? Samuel took one look and immediately frowned. Ryan, sitting beside him, leaned over for a look and seemed surprised too. Wait, Tyler, didn't you say that so-called underground queen was the big fish? Heh, big fish? I laughed and shook my head. That one already ran. What? Ryan's eyes widened. Tyler, weren't you planning to go after her? Go after her? I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There were some things I didn't want to explain, especially not in front of Samuel. Samuel, however, glanced at Ryan, then helplessly put the photograph away. Ryan, there is no so-called underground queen. For Chief Michael, that would actually be the best possible outcome. This guy really was a little good thing he never entered government service and had gone into business with me instead. Do you know where this person is? Samuel asked. I glanced at Emma beside me, who was happily focused on eating, and asked her. Speaking of which, do you know the guy we're talking about, Lucas Reed, the one whose real name should technically have been Tyler? He's my adoptive dad's biological son, and he's also supposed to marry into the Carter family. Lucas Reed, Emma, thought carefully for a moment. I think I remember him, before the Carter family collapsed. He started some kind of company and maybe a university too. Something related to pharmaceuticals, I think. And I think he was married to your third sister. Oh? I asked in surprise. How did he get started? And how did he meet my third sister? I think he caused some kind of scene at a hospital. Emma carefully searched through the vague memories she had. From what I heard, at first, your third sister looked down on him. But your seventh sister had a pretty good impression of him and kept saying good things about him to your third sister. She even paid compensation to the Bennett family herself. I think it had something to do with the granddaughter of that old man from the Art Association. Then later, with your seventh sister helping smooth things over, Lucas apparently went to treat the chairman of the Bennett family's Art Association when he got sick. Only after he cured him did your third sister start liking him. As Emma spoke, an incredibly gossipy look appeared on her face. I also heard that later your third sister, seventh sister, the Bennett family's granddaughter, and even one of his senior sisters all fought over him. The fake daughter in my family used to talk about it constantly. Apparently, Lucas won the lottery jackpot, and every stock he bought went up. Then he went to Changshan and Macau and made a fortune there too. Everyone called him incredibly lucky, a stock market genius, a gambling god, and one of the youngest experts in traditional medicine. By the end of that week, he was basically the hottest name in town. Rumors and gossip about him were everywhere. It would have been harder not to hear about him. The lottery, huh? I smiled and quickly performed a calculation. Then I opened the map on my phone and soon narrowed down a location. Then he's probably buying lottery tickets right now. But that idiot really thinks winning the jackpot is just because he's lucky? Isn't it? Emma and Ryan asked at exactly the same time. Samuel and I immediately looked at them like they were idiots. Because his dad is David Reed, I stood up. Lottery tickets, stocks, casinos, starting businesses. I gave a mocking laugh. Looks like this guy really plans to recreate everything from those novels. Uncle Samuel, I've sent the address to your phone. Sorry to trouble you. Samuel and I exchanged a glance and nodded knowingly. Then he stood up and left the restaurant. Ryan, I handed him the motorcycle key. Do me a favor. This time, Ryan took the key, but didn't leave immediately. He shifted awkwardly, clearly wanting to say something. So what is it? I could tell what was on his mind. Ryan scratched his head. Well, Tyler, I kind of want to learn cultivation too. I wanted to say yes, but stopped myself at the last second. Was I even qualified to teach someone yet? Did I have the right to take on a disciple? What if I agreed too casually and something went wrong later? I wasn't some random self-taught cultivator, and after what happened during the last kidnapping, it was obvious that the gods and higher powers of this world really existed. So taking on a disciple was something I needed to treat carefully. I'll ask my master and grandmaster when I get back. I answered seriously. I'll do my best to put in a good word for you, and I mean my best. But if my master and grandmaster refuse, there won't be much I can do. Ryan's expression immediately fell. He had seen me pay respects to my ancestral master, but he was still an ordinary person and couldn't fully understand certain things. So what I'd said probably sounded like an excuse, especially after all the dinners he'd attended with me, where I constantly spoke in riddles and implied more than I said. Ryan, I patted him on the shoulder. I'm not messing with you. I'm doing this because I want to be careful. If it doesn't work, I'll find another way. I remembered that cultivation novels from my previous life often divided disciples into direct disciples, true disciples, inner disciples, outer disciples, registered disciples, unofficial disciples, and so on. If the formal route didn't work, I could always make him an unofficial disciple. As for what I taught him, how much Ryan could actually learn, that would depend on him, especially after what happened last time. I genuinely felt I needed more extraordinary people around me. Otherwise, things could become seriously troublesome. Really? Ryan looked at me skeptically. Tyler, I didn't study much, and I don't understand people or politics as well as you do, but I've always treated you sincerely. So don't lie to me. Relax, I answered solemnly. Brothers don't lie to brothers. All right. Ryan still looked a little doubtful, but as far as he could remember, I'd never deliberately screwed him over. So he reluctantly rode away on the motorcycle. Meanwhile, I drove the A6 with Emma beside me, but instead of heading directly toward our planned destination, I seemed to be circling around the area. Emma sat in the passenger seat and watched me, then asked curiously, come to think of it, in the novels I've been reading, the real heirs who get reborn usually do exactly what Lucas is doing. So why are you taking such a roundabout path? You clearly understand this stuff really well. So why don't you buy lottery tickets? Why don't you trade stocks? Or gamble at casinos? Wouldn't that make money much faster than running a factory? And building those electric bicycles? I remember that in my previous life, Lucas used exactly those methods. And in less than a year, he made an enormous fortune. Because of favors and connections, I rested one arm against the window, while keeping the other on the steering wheel. Favors are like money in a bank account. If you never make deposits, there's nothing to withdraw. The reason Lucas was able to rise so quickly in your previous life was because he was spending the connections his dad had accumulated. From what I know about him, he probably never even realized that. So, if I'm right, in your previous life, you probably watched him build his tower, watched him entertain endless guests, and eventually watched the whole tower collapse. Emma stared at me with wide eyes and said, in disbelief, sometimes I seriously think you're the one who was reborn. You can even figure that out? Why would I need to be reborn? I shook my head the moment Lucas used the Carter family to get started, and then kicked them aside afterward. Once the Carter family collapsed, Lucas's ending was already decided. If he could keep moving forward with favorable winds and never face any real pressure until he reached the other side, then sure, he'd probably be fine. But could everything really stay that easy? His fate includes a major trial. If he survives it, he'll rise another level. But the requirement for rising is actually surviving. With his personality and understanding of the world, can he really do that? That's one of the basic rules of social relationships. I spoke with complete confidence, almost as though I were teaching her. You don't need to be reborn to understand it. Watch more, listen more, learn more, and you'll pick it up quickly. As for why I don't use those methods, I actually do. But I make sure the favors I spend and earn stay balanced, and I deliberately build up connections of my own. It's a slower path, but it carries fewer hidden risks and gives me far more people I can rely on in the future. Remember this, the corner of my mouth curled into a slightly arrogant, almost king-like smile. It's easy to add flowers to something already beautiful, but much harder to deliver coal in the middle of a snowstorm. And in this world, there's something even easier than helping someone who's already successful. It's kicking someone when they're down. When a wall starts falling, everyone pushes. So, someone like Lucas is bound to experience that someday. Then this time, Emma studied my profile and asked quietly, "Are we going to have him arrested? Are you going to send him to prison? The same way those people from the Carter family ended up there? Send him?" I rolled my eyes at Emma. "What do you mean, send him? That's slander. First, I'm not the police. Second, I'm not a court. I don't have the authority to arrest anyone. And I certainly don't have the power to judge them. I'm just a good citizen with a strong sense of justice, who happens to exercise his lawful and legitimate rights if they end up in prison. What does that have to do with me?" Come to think of it, Lucas managed to escape from the police station so easily, and even got home before I did, so he probably has some kind of artifact made from pseudo-spirit stone on him too. There really were so many generous people in this world. Lucas still hadn't realized that today would probably be the last day he could move around freely. He had read plenty of novels and had already decided to copy the way those protagonists built their fortunes. So today, Lucas decided to buy lottery tickets, because according to the novels, opening a stock account was a little troublesome. Whenever protagonists tried to open one, they usually ran into all kinds of minor problems. Lottery tickets were much simpler. You just walked in, picked some numbers, then waited to collect the jackpot. Of course, when claiming the prize, you'd need some kind of disguise. But the moment he walked inside, Lucas received the first no. The second lesson from reality in his life. In novels, winning the lottery was always described very simply. Either the protagonist was incredibly lucky or already knew the winning numbers. Then he bought a ticket, won, and collected the prize. But when Lucas actually tried to do it himself, he discovered that things weren't nearly as simple as he'd imagined. The process described in novels was basically like asking how to put an elephant into a refrigerator. Reality had a lot more steps, because there wasn't just one kind of lottery. At present, the mainland lottery system was broadly divided into welfare lotteries and sports lotteries, and within those categories were instant win games, like scratch cards, lotto-style games, like double color ball, number games, like 3D, Keno-style games, like Happy 8, and prediction-based games like sports betting. Every type had different rules, especially the prediction-style sports lotteries, which worked completely differently from most others. For Lucas, who had only ever seen these things mentioned inside novels, the moment he walked in, he was completely lost. This was nothing like the books. Wasn't he supposed to walk in, give them some numbers, then have the shop owner laugh and say there was no way they'd win, before reluctantly printing the ticket anyway? What was Pick 3? What was Happy 8? What were any of these things? They weren't actually that complicated, but for someone who had never interacted with this kind of thing before, Lucas genuinely had no idea what he was looking at. But if he asked someone, wouldn't that make him look too clueless? He had already mentally prepared himself to follow the protagonist's script, yet at the very first step, the road already seemed harder than expected. Lucas decided to watch for a while first. The games didn't look too difficult. As long as he understood the general process, that should be enough. The shop owner glanced at the young man, and seeing that he'd opened his mouth but said nothing, decided not to bother him. After quite a while, Lucas finally seemed to have figured something out, and was just about to speak when a man in his 30s suddenly stepped into the shop. The man stood perfectly straight, and his gaze was sharp as a hawk's. He swept his eyes across everyone inside, before finally locking onto Lucas. Lucas immediately sensed something was wrong. As a cultivator, he could clearly tell that this man's target was him. A sense of danger surged through him. Run. If he didn't leave now, he might not get another chance. Good. Lucas instantly pressed a concealment talisman onto himself, and his entire figure vanished from sight. Then he slapped a swift step talisman onto his leg. This kind of talisman could multiply his speed, and was considered extremely advanced in the current era. It couldn't let someone travel 1,000 miles in a day like in ancient times. But with each step, he could still cover 5 or 6 meters, which made it incredibly useful for escaping. Lucas turned and bolted, but the man's speed was even faster. Almost at the exact same moment, he appeared directly in front of Lucas. There was a sharp click as handcuffs snapped around Lucas's wrists. Then another talisman appeared between the man's fingers and was slapped onto Lucas's body. A binding talisman. It was a modern, heavily downgraded version of an ancient sealing talisman. Its only effect was preventing the person it was attached to from using spiritual energy for a short period of time, but it only sealed spiritual energy, not physical movement. Lucas should have been able to rip it off with brute force, so he immediately struggled. He might not be able to fight a cultivator today, but resisting an ordinary person's restraint should have been easy. Yet, he strained with all his strength until his face turned bright red. But the man holding him didn't move even an inch. Lucas felt like Sun Wukong pinned beneath Five Finger Mountain. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't break free. Stop wasting your strength. Read, kid, the man said. Whatever you've got on you, I've got too. Only then did Lucas notice the talismans attached to the man's body. There was a concealment talisman, a swift step talisman, a strength talisman, and the binding talisman currently stuck to Lucas. The man himself didn't possess spiritual energy, but talismans carried their own spiritual power and could be used by anyone. But how was this even possible? What third-rate talisman master had made these things? And how could they suppress the talismans Lucas had carefully drawn himself? What kind of ridiculous nonsense was this? Inside the deputy chief's office at the Binhai District Public Security Bureau, Lucas sat there with a dark expression, staring at the people in front of him. You set me up. His voice was low, almost like a growl. Dad, I'm your biological son. Why are you helping an outsider scheme against me? David Reed immediately felt as though someone had stabbed him through the chest. His voice filled with endless anger and helplessness, as though everything he'd been holding back was about to erupt, only to suddenly collapse into pain. His voice turned hoarse and trembled with emotion. Scheme against you? Tyler analyzed the risks for you. He tried to mediate for you. He was even willing to meet people he didn't want to see for your sake. And you call that scheming against you? What exactly did your master teach you? Do you even understand what you've done? You created this entire mess yourself, and you still don't understand what's happening. The whole family is cleaning up after you. And you call that a conspiracy? When his biological son first came home, David had truly been overjoyed. This was his own biological son. The son he and his wife had thought about day and night. They could have moved into a much better neighborhood and a much larger house years ago, but they'd always been afraid that one day their missing son might return and no longer know where to find them. So for more than a decade, they had stayed in that old 2-bedroom apartment, waiting and hoping to reunite with their son. David had imagined that reunion countless times. Even after adopting Tyler, his longing for Lucas had never faded, nor had his prayers that his biological son would someday return. The very night Lucas came home, David had already started thinking about how to explain everything to Tyler, how to introduce them, and how to balance the relationship between the two boys. He had even prepared himself for the worst. If their relationship truly became impossible to reconcile, then he had been ready to painfully let Tyler go. And yet his biological son had only just returned, less than a week ago, and had already handed him a disaster like this. It turned out that night, Tyler hadn't gone out just to eat barbecue at all. He had gone out to negotiate on Lucas's behalf. As long as Lucas had simply stayed where he was, Nothing serious would have happened, as long as they secured forgiveness from the Carter and Bennett families, and convinced them not to pursue the matter. Then, with a little maneuvering afterward, the major problem could have been reduced to a minor one, and the minor one quietly resolved. Everything could have ended cleanly, but this brat had, stubbornly, dragged everything to its current state. Do you realize this is your last chance? David's eyes were filled with disappointment. Tyler privately asked Uncle Samuel to bring you here quietly, because he's trying to minimize the impact of everything you've done. My son, David, tried to reason with him patiently. For the sake of his biological son, he almost wished he could tear his own heart out, hold it in his hands, and show Lucas just how much effort his old father was putting into saving him. Parents who truly love their children planned for their future. But right now, David wasn't even thinking that far ahead. He didn't want to become another father ruined by blindly protecting his son, and he certainly didn't want to watch Lucas end up behind bars. If there was still a way to save him, David would save him, but he was clearly following me. Lucas refused to think about any of that, and immediately said, I knew it. He was definitely stalking me. He's afraid I'll accomplish something. He's afraid you'll all see how outstanding I really am. That's exactly what happens in the novels. The fake heir gets scared that the real heir's talent will be noticed by the family. So he follows the real heir around, then frames him, or deliberately makes the family see the real heir embarrass himself. What a scheming bastard. He picked the perfect moment, right before I'd accomplished anything. Just as I was about to start making my move, he jumped out to interfere with me. I underestimated that fake heir. If I'd known, I should have done what the reborn real heirs in those novels always do, and dealt with the fake heir first, beat him until he couldn't take care of himself. So he couldn't interfere with anything I did, and only then start making my moves. He's just scared that I'll take back everything that originally belonged to me, Lucas roared. That's why he can't stand seeing me succeed. And I never expected you to help him scheme against me too. You haven't seen through how disgusting that guy really is. All of you have been fooled by him. With every shout, David became more disappointed, especially when he saw the murderous intent growing stronger in Lucas's eyes. At that moment, David finally felt that something inside his heart had shattered completely. His body trembling, David slowly stood up. He no longer looked at his biological son. His normally straight, proud posture now seemed hunched and frail, like that of a small old man. He shuffled forward and slowly walked out of the office. Several people were standing outside the door. Michael Mitchell and the newly appointed chief of the Benhai District Public Security Bureau, Andrew Yang, as well as Samuel Brooks. Me having rushed over drenched in sweat. Kemma and Linda Reed, who kept wiping away tears as she cried silently. Michael, David seemed to have aged decades in an instant. Handle it however it needs to be handled. Dad. I immediately stepped forward and supported my adoptive father. Emma reacted quickly too, as the biological daughter who'd returned to her family. She might have been naive in her previous life, the kind of heroine written to suffer endlessly for so-called family affection, until it eventually destroyed her. And, after being reborn, she hadn't gained the overwhelming abilities or opportunities found in novels. But she wasn't stupid. After everything she'd experienced in her previous life, and the years she'd spent drifting as a spirit, she might not compare with me, but I'd already explained some things to her on the way here, so she immediately understood what to do, and hurried over to Linda's side, supporting her gently, while quietly comforting her. David suddenly gripped my hand tightly. The man, who seemed to have aged more than 10 years, used almost all the strength he had left. Take a walk with Dad. Okay, I didn't say anything else. I simply supported him and walked out of the administrative building until he reached a small flower bed outside. David let out a long breath. Tyler, Dad wants to ask you for something. Dad, I shook my head. I can't calculate it. Lucas's master isn't an ordinary person. If I could divine anything about him, I would have gotten at least a rough result the first time I tried. His cultivation is far higher than mine, and he probably understands divination extremely well. He should have ways to conceal himself and his sect from heavenly calculation. I see. David wasn't particularly disappointed. He'd already expected that possibility. However, if what you want to know is what those people are after. I pulled out my phone. Then I happened to get something useful. The coming age, a great struggle. Our sacred sect, TL. David's brows immediately drew together. The voice clearly belonged to his biological son. Lucas seemed to be speaking somewhere, making promise after promise to a group of people. The promises and flattery weren't important. What mattered were the two pieces of information Lucas mentioned: the coming age of great struggle and the sacred sect. One of my business partners sent this to me, I explained. He's a supplier who specifically manufactures seats for my vehicles. It was pure coincidence. He happened to be invited to that banquet and recorded this before sending it to me. I genuinely hadn't planted that man there. Now that my electric motorcycles had begun selling, the massive order of 100,000 units had helped me secure several long-term suppliers, but I still hadn't formally begun building my own organization. This really had been a coincidence. I didn't know what that supplier's motives were, but the recording was definitely useful to me. As for this so-called sacred sect, it's hard to say. But I think your suspicion may be right, Dad. I followed David's line of thought. If that's really the case, I think you should contact Uncle Michael and pass this information to the provincial police. That old Taoist may be able to conceal himself from heavenly calculations and avoid divination, but in this era, there's no way he can hide from a real-world investigation forever. He was able to take Lucas up the mountain and later send him back down, which means he definitely has contact with the outside world. I paused slightly. Besides, spiritual energy is extremely thin right now. Even someone who's cultivated for decades might once have survived without ordinary food. But there's no way they can do that now. They still need to eat. Which means they have to purchase supplies from outside. Lucas loves comparing himself to novel protagonists. But his situation really is somewhat similar to one. If we use cultivation novels as a reference, I carefully thought it through. The Taoist temple is probably fairly small, hidden somewhere difficult to find in the mountains, and possibly quite rundown. There may also be more female disciples than male ones. If most of the disciples are women, then the old man would have to buy certain necessities specifically for them, like sanitary pads. I continue analyzing. So if locals around the area remember, an elderly Taoist-looking man who repeatedly bought large quantities of sanitary pads, there's a good chance he's the person who took Lucas into the mountains, and he may have bought them in bulk. Of course, he might also order them and have someone deliver them into the mountains. But either way, those supplies have to come from somewhere. If cultivators in this era can't survive without normal food and necessities, then they inevitably need ordinary supplies. And sanitary products are a basic necessity for women. So what if he can conceal himself from heavenly calculations? He can't conceal basic human needs. If the provincial police put enough effort into it, they should be able to uncover a suspicious cult hideout. And I was almost certain that the master hiding behind everything would never expect investigators to approach the problem this way. Because if he wanted to keep himself hidden from divination, he probably wouldn't dare perform calculations too frequently either. There was no need to overthink the reason. David's current expression already said everything. Heh, bet you didn't see that coming. The thing that takes you down won't be another cultivator. It'll be an entirely different field, David sighed. And the Carter family, Jad, I'll go. I nodded. The Carter family won't be difficult. It's the Bennett family I can't handle. That's why I haven't gone yet. In the end, I didn't take David home. Perhaps what happened with his biological son had hit him too hard. David and Linda supported each other and decided to walk through a nearby park for a while. As I watched them leave, I suddenly heard someone call out from behind me, "Tyler, leaving already?" It was Samuel Brooks. He was still dressed casually, with a smile mixed with helplessness. As he walked over to Emma and me, he shook his head and sighed. David's had a hard life. His child disappeared, and after finally finding him again, the boy turned out like this. At this point, all we can hope is that Lucas reforms himself properly while he's inside. I shook my head too, but something still felt wrong. Was Lucas's story really over? Was this truly the outcome my divination had pointed toward? Was this really the reason the Carter family and I remained entangled? Something felt off, but I couldn't explain what it was. So I stopped thinking about it and turned towards Samuel. Smiling. Uncle Samuel, looks like you've earned another achievement. What achievement? Samuel shook his head. But the smile never left his face. There were two kinds of achievements in this world. The ones everyone could see and the ones no one talked about. Everyone understood. And no one needed to say it aloud. After a brief silence, Samuel pulled a jade pendant from his pocket. This belongs to you, doesn't it? Oh, I drew out the sound. Then took the pendant. Yeah, it's mine. Thanks for helping me recover it, Uncle Samuel. The jade pendant was the pseudo-spirit stone artifact Lucas had been carrying. Without this thing, and with all his talismans confiscated, Lucas had just suffered the biggest nerf of his life. I held the pendant and examined it carefully. Can you tell anything from it? Samuel asked. I studied the pendant. On the front was a lotus pattern, and on the back was a design of auspicious clouds. The White Lotus sect, I blurted out. What? Samuel looked confused. Then he seemed to realize what I meant. That thing still exists? The White Lotus sect was a secret folk religious movement that worshipped and incorporated all kinds of deities and spirits. It had evolved from Manichaeism, Maitreya belief, Taoism, Buddhism, and various other traditions, blending them together over time. It was heavily suppressed during the Jia Qing era of the Qing dynasty, and the reason the White Lotus name was still so famous in modern times was largely because of Qing-era television dramas and several widely known novels, at least for me. My impression of the White Lotus sect mostly came from fiction, especially web novels, and historical novels set during the Ming and Qing dynasties. It appeared constantly, usually as an organization opposing the protagonist, and serving as convenient experience points, you could almost call it. One of the most frequently appearing NPC factions in Ming-Qing historical fiction. Who knows? I shook my head. The reason I'd thought of it was because I'd heard Lucas rambling at the banquet about how great our sacred sect was, and how our sacred sect would develop in the future. A sacred sect combined with a White Lotus emblem made it extremely easy to think of the White Lotus sect. Still, this artifact is higher quality than the others. That much was obvious. I had no idea what sect Lucas's master actually belonged to, but compared with those two human traffickers from before, this group clearly had real skill. And if it really was connected to the White Lotus sect, it wouldn't be that strange for some lineage to have survived into modern times. After all, the White Lotus tradition itself could be traced back as far as the Song dynasty, and the White Lotus uprisings during the Jia Qing era were also one of the major factors. That accelerated the Qing dynasty's decline. The rebellion spread across several provinces and involved huge numbers of people, so it wouldn't be surprising if some remnants had hidden away and survived. I casually put the jade pendant away. We'll head back first. After saying goodbye to Samuel, I took Emma back to the small apartment. Ryan was already waiting there. The three of us entered the room. Ryan looked at the strange arrangement inside, but didn't say anything. I simply told him to wait while I bathed and changed. After coming back out, I set up the small incense burner just like before, and respectfully placed 3 sticks of incense inside. I, Tyler, first disciple of the 72nd generation of the Qingwei sect, offer 3 sticks of incense for the continuation of our sect's lineage. I have taken it upon myself to act as the 72nd generation sect master, and wish to accept Ryan Mitchell as a 73rd generation disciple. I respectfully ask Grand Master and Master to issue your decree. After speaking, I bowed 3 times with complete respect. Then I took out a Bagua diagram and spread it across the floor. Before placing 3 1-yuan coins in my palm, Ryan watched from the side and almost wanted to complain. From what he remembered, people who performed divination like this were supposed to use ancient round coins with square holes. So why was I using ordinary, modern coins? Even though it looked a little ridiculous, he decided not to say anything. As for me, I would have preferred proper divination coins too. Unfortunately, everything my master had passed down was knowledge. There hadn't been a single magical artifact included, and the ancient coins used for divination couldn't just be any old copper coins. They're either gradually nurtured by the diviner personally, or inherited directly from one's master, making them special ritual artifacts. But originally, even those had started as ordinary coins. Since I didn't have any proper ones, I could only nurture my own. The important part was the long-term nurturing and repeated use. The exact shape and material weren't nearly as important. I pressed my palms together, shook the 3 coins in my hands, then tossed them onto the Bagua diagram. I checked the result, picked them up, shook them again, and repeated the process 3 times. Then I looked seriously at Ryan. I've got good news and bad news. Which do you want first? Ryan's expression immediately soured. His mouth twitched. Just tell me both. Don't play that game with me, okay? Fine. My expression became grave. Good news first. Grandmaster and Master agreed. But you'll only count as an inner disciple. Ryan's expression relaxed slightly. Being allowed to cultivate at all was already good news. As for the bad news, I took a deep breath. If you cultivate, there will be a deadly knot waiting for you in the future, possibly one with almost no chance of survival. But if you choose not to cultivate, you'll have a happy family, wealth, and a long life. Ryan's expression turned serious too. Exactly. I took out my phone and played the recording. Ryan listened carefully and quickly caught the part he was supposed to notice. The coming age of great struggle. Right, I nodded slightly. I don't know exactly what it means, but judging by Lucas's movements and plans, Jinghai might be one of the places where this so-called great struggle begins. You don't know anything about it either. Ryan turned his gaze toward Emma, hoping she might have some clue. No, Emma shook her head. I heard the phrase in my previous life, but only in passing. From the time I was alive until I died and before I was reborn, I never found out what cultivators meant by this so-called age of great struggle. If you're asking whether Jianghai became chaotic, then after the Carter family collapsed, all the large, mid-size, and small business owners in Shanghai fought over the market share the Carters left behind, and the Carter assets that were auctioned off. They fought openly and secretly for a long time, but that was basically a business war. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't sound like the kind of great struggle cultivators are talking about. Nothing? I was a little surprised. That seemed strange. Ryan suddenly remembered something. Oh, right. There's something I've wanted to ask for a long time. I just never got the chance. Emma, my future sister-in-law, in your first life, what happened to me in the end? You made a double-barreled shotgun out of metal pipes. Emma answered very directly, and there was obvious respect in her voice. Because your dad worked at the Municipal Police Bureau, you knew Tyler's situation very well. When Robert Carter and Grace Carter were taken out of a police vehicle and escorted into court for trial, you rushed out from the crowd gathered beside the entrance with a homemade double-barreled shotgun and improvised ammunition, and shot both of them dead. Then you were arrested and sentenced to death. Your dad resigned because of it. Ryan froze for a moment, then suddenly burst out laughing. Ha ha ha. Yeah, that does sound like something I'd do. But speaking of that, Emma turned her attention toward me. Are you seriously sure this isn't your second life too? Why do you think that? I asked. Because you weren't like this in my previous life. Emma said, if you really don't have memories from another life, then according to the original timeline, you should be locked in the Carter family's basement right now, or being punished just like I was. But look at you now. Her fiancé had not only devastated the Carter family, but even Lucas, who had once become one of the most influential people in Jianghai, had been thrown into custody before he could even rise to power. Because I'm the variable created by your rebirth. I answered directly. It's probably the butterfly effect. You're the butterfly that flapped its wings, and I'm the effect those wings created. You were reborn, and when the world reset around your rebirth, who knows what kind of bug happened? Then, after you came back, I became the variable that shouldn't have existed. Emma fell silent. She thought about it carefully and realized that the biggest reason she and I had ended up together in this life really was because this time I'd been pulled into that family group chat, and because I'd resisted, everything had changed. Lucas never got the chance to rise, and instead became the kind of male lead who'd be forced into abstinence behind bars. One punch can change your entire life. I clenched my fist. The moment you choose to fight back, you'll discover that everything becomes different. The sky turns blue, the grass turns green, and the future is no longer buried under gray haze. Once you've seen the light, you'll keep chasing it and never want to return to the darkness. After saying that, I looked at Ryan. So, brother, the future is already different. What Emma remembers is useful as a reference, but it won't necessarily happen the same way. Do you want to live as a wealthy man, or step onto a path that may very well end in death? Ha ha ha, Ryan burst out laughing, as though he'd never even considered hesitating. If my head gets cut off, it'll just leave a scar the size of a bowl. As for me, so if I really can't avoid it, I'll just wait for you all at the Bridge of Forgetfulness ahead of time. And tell Mung Po to add extra cilantro and extra chili. I want beef. Make it 2 bowls. Ryan wasn't in a hurry. Because of the spiritual energy problem. If you had to ask where the spiritual energy was currently most concentrated, then the answer was Emma's small apartment. This crude spirit gathering formation was most useful during dual cultivation because it amplified the surrounding spiritual energy. It could nurture and transform pseudo-spirit stones, while also nurturing and transforming spirit plants. But if you wanted to use this spirit-gathering formation for ordinary cultivation, the amount of spiritual energy it could provide was pitiful. Using it by itself for cultivation was barely possible, let alone for someone who hadn't even entered the path yet. So if Ryan wanted to step onto the path of cultivation, it would be extremely difficult. After holding a simple initiation ceremony, I formally accepted Ryan as my disciple, making him the first disciple of a cultivator who had only barely entered the path himself. Ancestral Master above. I, disciple Ryan Mitchell, bow here at the dawn of chaos, when primordial existence first opened and heaven and earth took form, before the memorial tablet of my ancestral master. I look up to the sacred realm of the Chan sect, where the primordial heavenly venerable established the 3 pure ones and transmitted the Tao, and the 12 golden immortals studied the profound mysteries of the sect. Today I willingly enter the Chan sect and sincerely acknowledge my master. The great Tao has its lineage, and the Chan sect descends from the primordial one, whose essence opened heaven, and whose sacred light illuminates the path. Though this disciple does not possess an innate Tao body, and my spiritual roots remain unknown, the coming age of great struggle approaches. I wish to receive the teachings of the sages and enter beneath Tyler's seat, to emulate Zhangzia's service to Zhou, Taiyi Zhenren's mastery of alchemy, and Yuding Zhenren's profound understanding of the Tao. I make 3 vows. First, I shall never fall into heterodox paths, and shall forever uphold the orthodox Taoist tradition. Second, I shall not defy the will of the investiture of the gods, and shall respectfully follow heaven's decree and the cycle of reincarnation. Third, I shall never fall to demons or evil trials, and shall firmly preserve the path of the primordial one. This disciple possesses no magical treasure, so I offer 3 sticks of incense. The first honors the primordial energy that opened heaven and earth. The second honors the sacred virtue that established the Chan sect. The third honors my master's compassion in guiding the world. I respectfully ask Master to grant me a token of the sacred lineage, to confirm my place within the Shan sect, and transmit to me the divine incantations of the 3 pure ones, so that I may glimpse the mysteries of the primordial heavenly scripture. This disciple shall diligently cultivate the 9 revolutions' mysterious art and forge an indestructible body. I shall study the river diagram and Luo book and comprehend the transformations of the stars. If demons from rival sects appear, I shall wield the treasures granted by my master and suppress all evil. If the calamity of investiture descends, I shall obey the decree of the primordial one and protect the ordained gods as they return to their rightful places. Today, with heaven and earth as witness and all gods and spirits listening, if this disciple betrays these vows, may the 4 sages and the immortal slaying formation bear witness to my punishment. May I fall into reincarnation for all eternity, and never again ascend the immortal path. After finishing, Ryan bowed 3 times and offered the incense. When he finished, he suddenly felt as though something inside his heart had cleared. He didn't know exactly what it was, but it felt like clouds had parted and sunlight had finally appeared. Then he lifted a cup of tea and respectfully offered it to Emma and me. He showed no discomfort at all, despite the sudden change in our relationship. In fact, From the very first day we started the business, Ryan had already vaguely sensed that the relationship between him and the younger brother he used to take care of had already begun to change. Ryan was straightforward, but he wasn't stupid. It wasn't that he didn't understand social dynamics. Sometimes he simply didn't want to bother thinking about them. Now Ryan held the tea and respectfully offered it to us. "Master, please accept this disciple's bow." The ceremony might have been simple, but it was still proper. There wasn't the slightest disrespect. Once all the unnecessary, complicated rituals were removed, the only thing that truly mattered was sincerity. I accepted the tea and took a sip. "From today onward, you are the first disciple of the 74th generation of the Chan sect. I will now transmit the Yuqing immortal art to you." And then I froze right there. Actually transmitting the technique completely stumped me. The Yuqing immortal art was the cultivation method I currently practiced, but it belonged to the original owner of this body. He had memorized it through brute force, possibly with some method used by his master to force the knowledge into his mind. And when it came to cultivation techniques, the most important thing after memorization was comprehension. My current cultivation was still incredibly basic, drawing spiritual energy into the body, cleansing the meridians and marrow, and taking the first step toward remaking the body. As for actually understanding the cultivation method, I had basically comprehended nothing. Without my own comprehension, it was extremely difficult to teach it to someone else, because if even I couldn't truly understand it, then the Yuqing immortal art was basically a heavenly scripture written in words I still couldn't read. I couldn't write it down properly or transmit it to someone else. Looking at Ryan's sincere and eager eyes, I finally sighed. I don't know how to teach this either. The knowledge is in my head, but I haven't comprehended it, so I can't transmit the technique. This was seriously awkward. I set down the teacup and clasped my hands behind my back. Looks like it's still the same problem. There's too little spiritual energy. If we're only talking about techniques, then that's manageable. According to my memories and what my master had said, many cultivators in this era, including me, had only learned a handful of spells and techniques. We were still very far from truly entering the Tao, without enough spiritual energy to continuously cleanse the body and marrow, and improve one's natural aptitude. Only someone with extraordinary talent, far beyond ordinary people, could directly comprehend the Tao. For everyone else, entering the Tao was almost impossible. It was probably like blind men trying to understand an elephant. At the earliest stages of cultivation, you were like someone wearing a blindfold while touching the elephant. Each time, you only learned one small part, without ever seeing the whole picture. The process of cleansing the body and marrow, and improving one's aptitude, was also a process of exploration and comprehension. It was like the blindfolded person touching the elephant over and over, until after enough attempts, the blindfold gradually became thin gauze. Eventually, he could begin to see the elephant, while the repeated exploration gave him a relatively complete understanding of what it was. But without spiritual energy, you couldn't cultivate and couldn't cleanse your body and marrow, which was the equivalent of asking someone who had never seen an elephant to describe one. Their mind would never develop the proper concept or understanding. So we still have to increase the available spiritual energy. I clasped my hands behind my back and thought carefully for a moment. Let's go to the factory's research department. Huh? Ryan looked surprised. Why are we going to the factory? Maybe, I thought for a moment, we can trust science. I just had a bold idea. Maybe we can actually make it work. Trust science? Emma couldn't help teasing me. Seriously? You're already cultivating immortality. That's not exactly scientific. And now you're saying we should trust science? I shook my head. Those things don't actually conflict. Cultivation and science aren't opposites. Science is fundamentally a method of understanding the world. Cultivation isn't idealism. It's materialism too, according to the principles of Marxist philosophy. Materialism holds that matter is the foundation of the world. Cultivation is the same. If cultivation objectively exists, and we can actually practice it, then that is an objective fact. And if something objectively exists, then it must operate according to objective laws. Whether it's talisman crafting, pill refinement, or cultivating the body itself, All of it involves understanding objectively existing phenomena, learning their underlying principles, then deliberately applying those principles, and consciously transforming reality through them. The more I spoke, the more certain I became. So in this era, we should be able to study cultivation scientifically and combine it with modern technology. Let's go to the factory. Maybe my idea really can work. The three of us quickly got into the car and drove toward the factory. Meanwhile, I took out my phone because just moments earlier, another thought had occurred to me. Since all these things existed in this world, cultivation methods, formations, pill recipes and the like couldn't possibly have survived only through oral transmission, especially in an era when spiritual energy had declined. The methods of preserving those inheritances should have included written records, and, after entering the modern era, wouldn't someone eventually scan that material and upload it onto the internet? I opened Baidu and searched keywords like formation, spirit gathering, and Taoism, along with several related terms. Very quickly, I found exactly what I was looking for. There really is something. I quickly opened one of the results and checked the original website, Mainland and Global Taoist Exchange and Development Association. Oh, this website is interesting. I carefully studied the spirit gathering formation posted there. It wasn't the same formation my master had passed down to me. Judging by its overall structure, it should have been developed around the late Qing or early Republican era by cultivators of that period. It appeared to be based on a formation called the Lu Clan Spirit, gathering formation from the late Ming and early Qing period, and modified into a newer spirit gathering formation as one of the most fundamental formations of all.